Compliment guilt rotation. They smile at you, and the first thing you feel is warmth. A kind word, a flattering remark, something that makes you stand taller for a moment. You're amazing at what you do. You're such a thoughtful person. I've never met anyone like you. These words feel like a gift, and in the beginning, they are. But slowly, almost invisibly, the gift comes with a price tag. Because not long after the compliment comes the guilt. A subtle shift. I wish you cared about me the way I care about you. It feels like I put in more effort than you do. You don't say nice things to me like I do for you. And suddenly, what once lifted you up now weighs on your shoulders. This is the cycle of the compliment guilt rotation, a psychological loop designed not to empower you, but to control you. On the surface, it feels like connection, affection, appreciation. But beneath it lies a manipulation so quiet, so carefully masked, that you begin to question whether you are the problem. They praise you to pull you in, then guilt you to keep you hooked. And the more you chase their approval, the deeper you sink into their pattern. Think about how powerful compliments are. Every human craves recognition. A student glows when a teacher notices their effort. A child treasures even the smallest praise from a parent. An employee works harder when their boss acknowledges their value. Compliments tap into one of our deepest psychological needs, the need to be seen. That's why manipulators weaponize it. They know the high you get when someone affirms your worth. But the trick is, they never let you enjoy it for long. Because soon after the sweetness comes the sting. I said all these wonderful things about you. Why can't you say them back? And you feel the pressure. Suddenly, you're not free to express yourself naturally. You're being measured, judged, held accountable to a standard you didn't agree to. This guilt works like a hook in the skin. You feel compelled to match their energy, to prove you're not ungrateful, to earn back their affection. And just when you do, they reward you with another compliment. The cycle restarts. You feel good, then guilty, then desperate for approval again. It's the emotional equivalent of spinning on a carousel. You keep moving, but you're not going anywhere. You're trapped in a rotation of false kindness and calculated guilt. Think about relationships you've seen, maybe even lived through. The friend who always showers you with grand praise, but sulks when you don't return it word for word. The partner who builds you up with adoration, but then accuses you of not loving them enough unless you echo it back. The colleague who constantly tells you how talented you are, but then complains you never appreciate their efforts in the same way. At first, you may not even notice the pattern. But over time, you feel it. The compliments no longer feel like gifts, they feel like obligations. You start rehearsing what to say before you even meet them, just to avoid the guilt trip. And in that moment, their control has already worked. They've trained you to seek balance on their terms, not yours. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism casinos use to keep gamblers hooked. Win, lose, win, lose. The unpredictable cycle makes you cling tighter because you never know when the next reward will come. In relationships, this looks like love and guilt, affection and withdrawal, praise and punishment. It's not consistent. It's not stable. It's designed to keep you chasing. And that chase is exhausting. You lose sight of what's real affection and what's manipulation. But here's the hardest part. People caught in this cycle often blame themselves. You wonder if maybe you are ungrateful. If maybe you don't say enough nice things back. If maybe you're the one failing to give what you receive. That's the power of guilt. It makes you turn the knife inward. And the manipulator doesn't have to raise their voice, doesn't have to insult you, doesn't have to do anything dramatic. They only need to withhold their warmth until you come crawling back for it. So how do you know if you're stuck in a compliment guilt rotation? Ask yourself, do the compliments you receive make you feel lighter or heavier? Do they free you, or do they bind you? A true compliment is a gift. It requires nothing in return. A false compliment is a contract. You owe something back. Real love never comes with a receipt. Manipulation always does. History and literature are full of these patterns. In ancient courts, flatterers used praise to climb into favor with kings, only to remind them of loyalty debts later. In toxic friendships, poets and diarists recorded the suffocating weight of conditional affection. Even in everyday workplaces, leaders who use recognition as a tool of control leave behind teams riddled with anxiety instead of confidence. The pattern isn't new. It's as old as human interaction itself. What changes is whether or not we recognize it for what it is. Breaking free requires something most people forget, the right to receive without obligation. You are allowed to accept kindness without owing it back in equal measure. You are allowed to let someone's words sit in your heart without scrambling to prove you're worthy of them. And you are allowed to walk away from anyone who twists their praise into chains. Because genuine love, genuine respect, genuine friendship, they don't keep score. They don't guilt you for breathing differently. They don't demand reciprocity as payment for recognition. They give because giving is natural. The compliment guilt rotation thrives on your silence, your self-doubt, your desperate attempt to keep the balance. The way out is not to argue harder or to match their praise word for word. It's to see the rotation for what it is, a wheel that keeps you spinning. And once you see it, you can step off. Yes, it will feel uncomfortable. You might feel like you're abandoning someone, or like you're suddenly the one who's ungrateful. But that discomfort is not the truth. It's the residue of their control. With time, it fades. And in its place comes something more powerful than their approval, your own. So the next time someone praises you and then twists it into guilt, remember, love doesn't come with strings. Affection doesn't come with chains. And your worth is not something to be dangled like a prize you have to earn. Step back, breathe, and see the cycle for what it is. Not love, not loyalty, not care, just manipulation wrapped in silk words. And once you know that, you'll never mistake the trap for tenderness again. Reflection validation cycle. Imagine meeting someone who feels like they have known you forever. Their words echo your own thoughts. Their gestures align with your hidden habits, and their laughter seems to harmonize perfectly with yours. In their presence, you feel an uncanny sense of recognition, like looking into a mirror that reflects not your face, but your very soul. This is the beginning of the reflection validation cycle. It starts as a dance of resonance, where every step you take is matched flawlessly, where your quirks and vulnerabilities are not just noticed, but celebrated. You feel seen, understood, validated at a level most people never reach. But the very perfection of this reflection hides the hook that will later drag you into confusion and dependency. The cycle works like this. At first, they give you the gift of reflection. If you are quiet and reserved, they mirror calmness. If you are witty and sarcastic, they sharpen their tongue to match yours. If you reveal wounds, they show scars in the same places. It feels authentic, because who wouldn't want someone who understands them so well? In psychology, this is a powerful tool of attachment. We long for resonance, for someone to confirm that we are not alone in our chaos. The first stage makes you feel chosen, as if the universe itself has finally sent you a counterpart who doesn't just hear you, but is you. This is the intoxication of validation. It is not shallow praise. It is a reflection of your identity, delivered back to you with precision. But then comes the withdrawal. Suddenly, the mirror dims. They stop reflecting you with the same intensity. The jokes that once landed are left hanging. The shared vulnerabilities are tucked away behind a wall of silence. The warmth cools, and the once perfect synchrony turns into static. It is here the cycle reveals its cruelty. You begin to chase the reflection. You crave that feeling of being understood, and you start adjusting yourself to win it back. Maybe if you're funnier, warmer, more open, they'll mirror you again. Maybe if you share more, if you compromise more, they'll return that intoxicating validation. Without realizing it, you shift from being yourself to performing yourself, desperate to reignite the reflection that once felt so natural. Think of it like walking through a hall of mirrors. At first, every surface reflects you clearly, amplifying your presence, surrounding you with versions of yourself that feel affirming. But then, one by one, the mirrors fade into black glass, leaving only a single dim reflection. You move closer, waving your arms, adjusting your stance, hoping to coax the full image back. The more you chase it, the more it recedes. And in this desperation, your sense of self begins to fracture. You start asking questions. Was I too much? Did I change? Did they change? The truth is simpler and darker. The cycle was always designed to shift your focus from authenticity to pursuit. Psychologists sometimes describe this pattern as intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of conditioning. When a reward is given consistently, it loses its addictive edge. But when it is given unpredictably, the mind becomes obsessed. Just like a gambler pulling the lever of a slot machine, you keep trying, convinced that the next moment will bring the jackpot of reflection and validation again. And when it does return, briefly, the relief is so intoxicating that it erases all the discomfort that preceded it. This is why the reflection validation cycle feels so binding. It ties you to another person with invisible threads of hope and scarcity. Examples of this dynamic appear everywhere. In relationships, it might look like a partner who at first mirrors your dreams, your fears, your passions, only to later grow distant, making you fight to earn back that intimacy. In workplaces, it can manifest as a mentor who at first reflects your brilliance and makes you feel irreplaceable, then begins to withhold recognition until you scramble to prove your worth again. Even in friendships, the cycle can creep in. Someone who at first seems like your twin flame of humor and values, later offering silence where once they offered resonance, leaving you unsettled and chasing their attention. The cycle is not always conscious, but its effect is always the same: dependency through reflection and withdrawal. The danger lies in what this cycle does to identity. At first, you feel more yourself than ever because someone else confirms it. But as the mirroring fades, you begin to lose track of where your reflection ends and their approval begins. Slowly, you mold yourself to fit the image you think they want to reflect. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and instead ask, "Who do I need to be for them to mirror me again?" It becomes a subtle but devastating shift, from authenticity to performance, from selfhood to dependency. And because the reward is so tied to your identity, the cycle burrows deep into your psyche. It is not just about liking you. It is about validating you, or withholding that validation until you twist yourself into knots to retrieve it. What makes this cycle so insidious is that it feels like love, like understanding, like connection. And in moments, it might even be those things. But love that demands you chase your reflection is not love. It is control. Understanding that disappears until you perform is not understanding. It is manipulation. The reflection validation cycle feeds on the human hunger to be seen, and then weaponizes that hunger to make you lose sight of yourself. It's not that the reflection was fake. It's that it was never stable. It was always conditional. Breaking free begins with recognizing the mirror for what it is. If someone reflects you only to withdraw, leaving you starved for their version of validation, you must remember, the real reflection is not in them. It is in you. The truth of who you are does not vanish when they stop mirroring it. You are not made real by another's acknowledgement. You are already real, already whole, already valid. The cycle thrives on your forgetfulness of that fact. It convinces you that your reflection exists only in their eyes. But the moment you reclaim your self-definition, the mirror loses its power. It becomes just another piece of glass, no longer the portal to your worth. In the end, the reflection validation cycle is less about them and more about us. The hunger that makes us susceptible, the longing that blinds us, the chase that empties us. To see it clearly is to step out of the hall of mirrors and realize you never needed those reflections to exist in the first place. Because you are not a shadow waiting for light. You are the light itself, and no withdrawal can extinguish that. Forgiveness leverage loop. Imagine this. Someone wounds you deeply through betrayal, deception, or calculated cruelty. You're left torn apart, and when you finally confront them, they break down. They apologize with such dramatic sincerity that you feel the storm inside you quiet for a moment. Tears, promises, grand declarations of regret. It all feels overwhelming. And because you are compassionate, because you believe in the power of forgiveness, you grant it. You think you've taken the higher road, that you've liberated yourself by releasing the bitterness. But what you don't yet realize is that your act of mercy is being twisted into a tool, not for healing, but for control. This is the forgiveness leverage loop. The loop begins with harm. A wound so raw that it shakes your trust and makes you doubt the relationship. Then, the performance of guilt arrives, not a quiet, humble acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but a display so elaborate it feels theatrical. They don't just admit fault, they immerse you in the spectacle of their suffering. They cry harder than you. They tremble as though their world has ended. They make you feel like you hold their life in your hands. In that moment, your anger transforms into pity, your hurt into responsibility. You forgive, not because the wound is healed, but because you are emotionally cornered into becoming the savior of the very person who caused the pain. Now the loop tightens. The apology becomes a relic, a constant reminder they will use later. Remember when I broke down and you forgave me? That shows how loyal you are to me. That proves we have something no one else has. Your forgiveness is rewritten as evidence of your devotion, not their wrongdoing. They turn your generosity into a certificate of loyalty, brandishing it every time you question their actions again. You begin to realize forgiveness wasn't the end of the cycle. It was the beginning of the trap. Think of it like this. Imagine someone repeatedly breaking a vase you treasure. Each time, they stage a grand apology, telling you how much they regret it, how lost they would be without your forgiveness. You glue the vase back together, again and again, convincing yourself that the cracks make it more meaningful. But the truth is, it only keeps getting weaker. And one day, when you ask them why they keep breaking it, they point to the glued pieces and say, "See? You always forgive me." That's what makes us special. The fragility of the vase becomes their proof of your strength, rather than their proof of carelessness. The psychology behind this loop is manipulative brilliance. Humans crave closure, and forgiveness often feels like the quickest route. To forgive is to silence the chaos, to reclaim peace. But manipulators weaponize this impulse. They know you want the pain to stop, so they manufacture apologies not to repair the relationship, but to accelerate your return to compliance. This creates what psychologists call a trauma bond, a cycle where pain and relief are intertwined so tightly that the victim mistakes suffering for connection. The deeper the hurt, the more powerful the reconciliation feels. And so, forgiveness becomes addictive. The worse they hurt you, the more dramatic the apology, and the more intoxicating the reconciliation. You start mistaking the cycle itself for love. Real-life examples of this are haunting. Consider relationships marked by infidelity. One partner cheats, the other discovers the betrayal. What follows isn't just a quiet admission of guilt. It's a flood of tears, promises to change, perhaps even dramatic gestures like booking a vacation, writing love letters, or publicly declaring their devotion. The cheated partner forgives, often believing the relationship has entered a stronger phase because they overcame the betrayal together. But soon, the pattern repeats. The forgiveness is cited as proof of true love, while the betrayal is minimized as a test they passed. The victim's mercy becomes the abuser's shield. Or think about toxic friendships. A friend publicly humiliates you with a cruel joke. Later, they sob, telling you they never meant it, that they can't live with the thought of losing you. You forgive, and in time, when you try to set boundaries, they remind you. But remember how you forgave me that one time? That proves you're my real friend. Real friends don't give up. Your forgiveness, meant as compassion, is twisted into obligation. The danger of the forgiveness leverage loop is subtle but devastating. Forgiveness, in its pure form, is meant to free the forgiver, not empower the offender. It's supposed to be an act of self-liberation, not a binding contract of loyalty. But in this loop, forgiveness is rewritten as proof of permanence. The manipulator reframes your empathy as devotion, your compassion as indebtedness. You begin to feel guilty for even questioning them again. You start to believe that forgiving once means forgiving forever. And in that belief, you become trapped in an endless loop of harm, apology, forgiveness, and harm again. Breaking free from this loop requires brutal clarity. You must learn to separate genuine remorse from performance. A real apology isn't about grand gestures or dramatic displays. It's about consistent change in behavior. It isn't proven in words spoken through tears, but in actions repeated quietly over time. And forgiveness does not mean reunion. You can forgive someone in your heart and still walk away. You can release the bitterness without re-entering the cycle. True forgiveness isn't about proving your loyalty to someone else. It's about proving your loyalty to yourself, to your peace, to your worth. The forgiveness leverage loop thrives in the space where compassion becomes compulsion, where your empathy is turned against you, where your desire for peace is manipulated into silence. But once you see it for what it is, once you understand that forgiveness is being used as a chain rather than a key, you reclaim the very power they've stolen. And you realize that forgiveness was never supposed to be their weapon. It was supposed to be your liberation. This is the haunting paradox. In the wrong hands, your forgiveness can become their proof of ownership. But in your hands, forgiveness, paired with boundaries, becomes your escape. The choice is yours, to let the loop tighten around you, or to break it and finally breathe free. Rescue dependence spiral. There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't come at you with aggression, but with the illusion of kindness. It's called the rescue dependence spiral. At first glance, it looks like compassion. Someone swoops in, saves you when you're struggling, and you feel grateful. But what if the very hand that rescues you was the same one that loosened the rope, cut the lifeline, or quietly set the fire in the first place? What if their help was less about saving you and more about binding you? This spiral begins subtly. Imagine you're under immense pressure at work because you missed a key detail in a report. A colleague suddenly steps in, fixes everything at the last moment, and earns your relief and admiration. But later, you realize it was the same colleague who withheld the crucial information from you earlier, the same one who let you walk into that mistake. Their rescue wasn't an act of kindness. It was a stage performance designed to make you lean on them. They orchestrated both the crisis and the cure. And now, you feel indebted. You begin to rely on them, even trust them, because you believe they've proven themselves to be your lifeline. This spiral is powerful because it plays on two of the deepest human instincts, gratitude and survival. When someone saves us, even from a small crisis, our brains flood with relief and attachment. We lower our guard. We stop questioning their motives. Think of an abusive relationship where one partner consistently destabilizes the other emotionally, picking fights, creating chaos, planting seeds of self-doubt, only to arrive later with flowers, apologies, or dramatic gestures of comfort. To the outside world, it looks like devotion. To the victim, it feels like love. But in reality, it's dependency carefully engineered. The abuser is both the storm and the shelter, ensuring that the victim has nowhere else to run but into their arms. The intensity of this loop is magnified in families. A parent might criticize a child harshly, break down their self-esteem, and then console them afterward as the only source of reassurance. The child grows up tethered, conditioned to believe that the same figure who wounds them is also their only path to healing. Over time, the line between harm and care blurs. The victim stops noticing the hidden hand that caused the injury, focusing only on the relief that follows. It's the classic poisoning then curing trick, but in human psychology, it leaves scars far deeper than physical ones. One of the darkest parts of the rescue dependence spiral is how it convinces you that you're incapable on your own. If every problem you face seems too big, and every solution seems to come from this one person, you start to doubt your own strength. It's not just gratitude anymore, it's identity erosion. You begin to believe you're fragile, helpless, unable to function without their guidance. This isn't an accident. It's by design. Their rescue works like a leash. The more you thank them, the tighter it pulls. Let's bring this into real-world scenarios. Picture a manager who creates unnecessary obstacles for their team, assigning impossible deadlines, withholding resources, or giving unclear instructions. When the team inevitably struggles, that manager steps in at the last minute, fixes the problem, and earns praise as the competent savior. To upper management, it looks like leadership. To the employees, it feels like salvation. But beneath the surface, it's exploitation. The manager doesn't want empowered employees. They want dependent ones who can't function without their guidance. The system is rigged so that their presence always feels essential. Or consider a romantic relationship where one partner constantly destabilizes finances. They make reckless spending decisions, ignore bills, or create crises through irresponsibility. Then, when debt collectors or landlords come knocking, they suddenly appear calm, decisive, the one who handles it. To the other partner, it reinforces the belief, I couldn't survive without them. Yet the reality is chilling. They are trapped in a cycle where the rescuer is also the saboteur. The psychological weight of this spiral comes from its rhythm. Crisis, rescue, gratitude. Crisis, rescue, gratitude. Each repetition sinks deeper into your psyche until it feels like law. And once dependency takes root, breaking free feels terrifying. Why? Because the rescuer has trained you to fear independence. They've made the world look unsafe, chaotic, overwhelming, unless they are by your side. It's a manipulation that doesn't just cage you. It convinces you that the cage is safety and freedom is the real threat. What makes the rescue dependence spiral so difficult to see is its camouflage. Society often praises those who step in and help. Heroism is attractive. Sacrifice is noble. Caregiving is beautiful. But when help is contaminated with control, when rescue is born from sabotage, when care is used as a weapon, it ceases to be love. It becomes domination. The rescuer doesn't want you to rise. They want you to kneel. They don't want you to grow strong. They want you to grow attached. Breaking free requires the brutal clarity to ask hard questions. Who benefits from my crisis? Who gains from my dependence? Do I admire this person because they truly support me, or because they are the only one allowed to? The spiral unravels only when you stop seeing the rescuer as a savior and start seeing them as the architect of your struggle. It's painful to admit. It feels like betrayal. But in reality, it's the first step back towards sovereignty. Because true rescue, true love, true care, true support doesn't demand dependency. It empowers you to stand taller, to walk away, to face the next storm without needing to be saved. Anything less is not rescue. It is a leash disguised as love. And once you recognize that, you'll see that the greatest escape you'll ever make isn't from the problems they create. It's from the false rescues that bind you to them. That's when freedom begins. Crisis bond creation. Imagine a relationship that feels like a storm you can't escape. One moment, everything is calm, almost too calm, and then suddenly, chaos. An argument sparked out of nothing, an accusation pulled from thin air, or a fabricated emergency that demands all of your attention. In that moment, your heart races, adrenaline floods your body, and your emotions spike so high it feels like you're in the middle of a crisis. Yet here's the trap. That chaos doesn't push you away. It bonds you. Because once the storm settles, the relief that follows feels intoxicating, like passion, like love, like connection. This is not an accident. This is the deliberate creation of a crisis bond. Crisis bond creation thrives on a psychological principle we often underestimate: the power of heightened emotional states. When your nervous system is pulled between panic and relief, your brain wires the experience as intimacy. The person who caused the pain is also the one who provides the comfort. And so your system can't distinguish love from adrenaline, devotion from survival. You begin to equate chaos with closeness. It feels like deep passion, but it's actually carefully orchestrated dependency. Think of the classic cycle. They pick a fight over something trivial, maybe a text you didn't answer quickly enough. Voices rise, accusations fly, your chest tightens. You feel cornered, misunderstood, destabilized. But then, when you're at your breaking point, they soften. They apologize. They hold you. They tell you how much you mean to them. That rush of relief floods your system like a drug. The same hands that pushed you into the fire are the ones that pull you out. And in your confusion, that contradiction feels like love intensified. Over time, your body becomes addicted not to peace, but to the spikes of stress and release. This pattern is eerily similar to how gamblers stay hooked at a slot machine. The unpredictability, the sudden wins after long stretches of losses, creates the strongest form of attachment. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. When you never know whether you'll get reward or punishment, the attachment becomes stronger than if the response were consistent. In crisis bond creation, the win is the tender apology, the warm embrace, the sudden return to normalcy. The loss is the endless emergencies, the chaos, the fights. Together, they create the most powerful psychological leash imaginable. Real stories reveal the grip of this cycle. A woman recalls how every month her partner would manufacture a financial crisis. Threats of losing the apartment, panicked calls about money disappearing, angry blame thrown her way. She would cry, beg, scramble to help, until finally he would reassure her that everything was under control. The relief of not being abandoned, of not being financially ruined, felt like love. It wasn't until years later that she realized the emergencies were illusions, carefully staged to keep her tethered by fear and hope. In another case, a man describes how his partner constantly invented medical scares. Late-night chest pains, sudden dizzy spells, dramatic collapses in public. He would rush to save her, terrified of losing her, desperate to prove his devotion. And when she recovered, she would thank him tearfully, whispering that no one else would care for her like he did. He mistook that cycle of terror and relief for the deepest form of intimacy, not realizing that his nervous system was being manipulated into bonding through crisis. The reason this works is rooted in biology. When our bodies enter fight or flight mode, cortisol and adrenaline surge. When the crisis subsides, oxytocin and dopamine flood in, binding us to the person who appears to bring the calm. This is the same chemistry that cements bonds in trauma, soldiers in combat, hostages with captors, survivors of disasters. The shared intensity forges a tie that feels unbreakable. Except in crisis bond creation, the disaster is not natural or unavoidable. It is designed, manufactured, a trap disguised as closeness. What makes this cycle so devastating is that it rewires your perception of what love should feel like. Quiet stability starts to feel empty. Healthy relationships may even feel boring compared to the roller coaster of highs and lows. You come to crave the very storms that drain you, because without them, you feel disconnected. That's how the crisis bond ensures its survival. You begin to believe passion and peace cannot coexist. The tragedy is that many victims of this cycle blame themselves. They think, I must be addicted to drama. I must not know how to love properly. But the truth is, their bodies were conditioned. Each emergency was a training session, teaching their nervous system to confuse fear with intimacy, chaos with devotion. This is why people stay even when they know they're being hurt. It doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like the deepest love they've ever known. Breaking free from crisis bond creation requires something excruciating, learning to live without the highs and lows. It means detoxing from adrenaline, learning to tolerate peace, and relearning what love should feel like. It's not easy, because your body resists. It craves the rush. The silence feels unbearable at first, like withdrawal. But slowly, as calm becomes safe instead of suffocating, the spell breaks. You begin to see the manipulation for what it was. Not passion, not love, but control dressed as intensity. And so, the question that lingers is this. How many of us mistake chaos for love, not because we want to, but because we've been taught to bond through storms? How many of us are still addicted to the crises that bind us, not realizing the quiet truth, that real love doesn't need a fire to prove it burns? Freedom permission trap, they smile and tell you. Of course, you can do what you want. I would never stop you. Those words sound like freedom, like permission, like trust. But freedom offered with conditions is not freedom at all. Because the moment you step out to claim that independence, the air shifts. The silence grows heavy. The warmth cools into distance. A look, a sigh, a passive remark, small signals that you've committed a betrayal by simply living as yourself. You were told you were free, but you've been made to feel guilty for taking that freedom. This is the freedom permission trap, the cycle where independence is granted in words but punished in reality. And it is one of the most subtle forms of control. It starts gently. They reassure you that they're not controlling, that you're allowed to have your own life. They may even brag about how unlike others they are. I'd never tell you what to do. But soon, they reveal the trap. If you spend time with friends, they go cold. If you pursue a hobby, they withdraw affection. If you make a decision without them, they frame it as disrespect. And when you notice, when you ask what's wrong, they wrap their response in the language of love. I just miss you when you're gone. I just get jealous because I love you so much. I just want to be part of everything you do. And you start to question yourself. Was it really freedom if it hurt them? Was your independence actually selfish? Slowly, the guilt grows heavier than the permission they gave. This is how control works when it wears the mask of care. They don't forbid you outright, because that would reveal their hand too clearly. Instead, they allow, but then punish. They frame their punishment not as cruelty, but as passion. They turn jealousy into proof of love. And you begin to live not by your own choices, but by the fear of their reactions. Every decision becomes a calculation. If I go, will they be upset? If I choose this, will I lose their warmth? If I take this step, will I pay for it later? And just like that, your freedom, your real, breathing independence, shrinks until it fits inside the boundaries they've drawn with invisible lines. Think about how powerful this trap is. Outright control is easy to recognize. You can fight against someone who forbids, who commands, who chains you openly. But the freedom permission trap is harder because it dresses itself as kindness. They smile as they hand you the key, but the lock on the door is still theirs. You only learn that after you try to walk through, and by then, you already feel guilty for turning the handle. Examples of this pattern exist everywhere. In relationships, a partner who insists they're supportive until you shine too brightly, and then they sulk. In families, a parent who says, "You can live your life how you want," but then weeps when you move away, framing your independence as abandonment. In workplaces, a boss who encourages you to innovate, but punishes you for stepping outside the mold. The permission is granted only as long as it doesn't disturb their control. And when it does, the backlash is subtle enough to make you doubt yourself, but strong enough to keep you restrained. Psychologists often describe this as a covert form of coercion. It relies on mixed signals, on the tension between words and actions. The words say, "You're free." The actions say, "Your freedom hurts me." And because humans are wired for empathy, you begin to cage yourself voluntarily, just to avoid the emotional consequences. That's the brilliance and the cruelty of this trap. They never have to forbid you outright. You'll do the limiting for them. The danger here is that over time, you lose the ability to distinguish between love and control. They've trained you to believe that jealousy is proof of affection, that discomfort is proof of care, that restriction is proof of passion. And so, you settle into a life where your choices are no longer truly yours. They're filtered through the lens of someone else's reactions. You stop asking what you want and start asking what will keep the peace. And that is how independence dies, not with a slammed door or shouted command, but with a smile, a sigh, and a quiet punishment. But there is a way out, though it is difficult. The first step is to name the pattern. To see that permission with punishment is not freedom, it's control with softer branding. The second step is to ask yourself, do I feel freer after their words, or more anxious? Do I live as myself around them, or as the version they will tolerate? Do I choose for me, or do I choose to avoid their reaction? If the answers lean toward the latter, you are not free. You are performing in the prison they've built. Real love does not demand you clip your wings in order to keep the nest warm. Real love celebrates independence, even when it stings. Real love does not punish you for exercising the very freedom it claims to grant. Yes, jealousy is human, but jealousy dressed as love, used as a leash, is not care. It is fear disguised as passion, and fear always seeks control. So the next time someone tells you, you're free to do what you want, don't just listen to the words. Watch what follows. Does their affection remain steady, or does it vanish the moment you act on that freedom? Do they hold space for your independence, or do they shrink it with guilt and silence? Because love that shrinks your world is not love at all. It is control disguised as devotion. And once you see the trap for what it is, you can step outside it. The air may feel colder at first, lonelier even. But over time, you will realize something powerful. Freedom without guilt is the only kind worth having. And real love will never punish you for breathing it. Personality sculpting loop. Imagine meeting someone who seems to admire you deeply, but subtly, quietly, they begin shaping you. At first, it feels harmless. Suggestions about what music you should try, the clothes that suit you best, the way you should spend your evenings. You think it's sharing, a healthy exchange of ideas. But slowly, your own tastes, your own instincts, are overwritten. The books you once loved gather dust because they don't fit you anymore. The foods you once craved feel less appealing after constant nudges toward new preferences. Your routines, your little quirks, all begin to bend under their influence. What emerges is not a truer version of yourself, but a sculpted one, chiseled and reshaped to fit their design. And then, with a smile, they praise you. They say, "You've become exactly who I always knew you could be." But beneath the compliment hides control, because you are no longer simply yourself. You are a creation. This is the personality sculpting loop. It is not transformation born of your own choice. It is transformation curated by another's hand. What makes it so deceptive is that it often feels like growth. After all, they frame it as improvement. You're becoming more sophisticated, more stylish, more confident, more aligned with your potential. They speak as though they've unlocked something hidden in you, when in truth, they've buried your original self under layers of carefully placed suggestions. And because they reward you for it, the loop tightens. Every time you adjust to their preferences, they offer validation. Every time you resist, they withdraw warmth. Over time, Your nervous system learns to crave their praise, to fear their silence. You start sculpting yourself preemptively, molding your choices before they even ask, because you already know what will earn approval. The loop works like a psychological apprenticeship, but the teacher's goal isn't to expand you. It's to shape you into a version that serves them. Imagine clay on a potter's wheel. The clay does not move itself. It spins and bends because the potter's hands force it into shape. And when the potter admires the finished form, the clay cannot claim it was its own choice to be carved that way. Yet when you live inside the loop, it feels as if you chose it. Because every new habit, every new taste, every new way of speaking, you carried out yourself. The hands that shaped you left no fingerprints. Only the illusion that you've become better. In relationships, this shows up as the partner who reshapes your circle of friends until only those they approve of remain. In work, it can be the mentor who slowly edits your style and personality until you resemble their shadow more than yourself. Even in families, it can appear in parents who insist they're bringing out the best in you, while chiseling away the parts that don't fit their vision. And when they finally tell you, "You've grown so much, I'm proud of who you've become," the praise lands like sunlight, but it warms only the version of you they built, not the one you buried. The tragedy of the personality sculpting loop is that it steals the authorship of your identity. You no longer evolve because of your own curiosity, your own values, your own hunger to expand. You evolve because someone else decided what shape you should take. And every compliment becomes a chain disguised as gold. You begin to measure your worth not by how aligned you feel with yourself, but by how perfectly you match the blueprint they quietly drafted for you. Breaking free requires asking yourself a painful question. Who would I be if no one praised me for it? What music would I listen to? What clothes would I wear? How would I spend my time if no one rewarded me for becoming better? The answers might feel frightening, because they pull you back to the raw clay underneath, before the sculptor's hands ever touched you. But only in that rawness is there freedom, because the loop thrives on rewriting your reflection until you mistake their design for your destiny. And the only way out is to reclaim authorship, to say, "This is me, not because someone else molded me into it, but because I chose it." Until then, every compliment will keep you trapped in the marble, mistaking a prison for perfection. Absence craving cycle. Imagine this. One day they are everywhere, texting you, calling you, filling your days with attention that feels like sunlight. Then, without warning, they vanish. No messages, no explanations, only silence that grows louder with each passing hour. Your mind spins, replaying every moment, wondering if you did something wrong. The emptiness gnaws at you, because the sudden absence is not just silence, it is withdrawal. You don't realize it yet, but this is the absence craving cycle, a psychological pattern that manipulates your need for consistency into a craving for their return. The disappearance is intentional. When someone pulls away suddenly, it creates a vacuum. That vacuum amplifies longing. Human beings are wired to seek equilibrium, and when the connection is abruptly severed, the imbalance consumes you. You feel restless, distracted, addicted to the thought of their presence. You begin to replay conversations, stalk their online traces, cling to small clues. The absence creates tension, and your brain, desperate for resolution, builds anticipation for their reappearance. It is not just missing them, it is craving them. Then, as suddenly as they vanished, they return. Not with coldness, but with warmth. They reappear like a hero walking back into the story, arms open, voice soft, presence overwhelming. They tell you they missed you. They shower you with affection. They act as if nothing happened. And in that moment, the reunion feels intoxicating. The contrast between the silence and the sudden affection magnifies the emotional impact. You feel euphoric, as if love itself has been restored, as if your patience and longing were rewarded. You don't see it as manipulation. You see it as proof that what you share must be powerful. This is how the cycle feeds itself. The pain of absence makes the presence feel like a high. The longer the silence, the stronger the craving. The warmer the return, the deeper the relief. Over time, you become conditioned to equate love with this roller coaster. Withdrawal followed by indulgence, hunger followed by feasting. It is not stability that hooks you, it is volatility. And without realizing it, you start craving not just them, but the cycle itself. Think of it like fasting and feasting. If you eat regularly, meals feel ordinary. But if you starve for days and then are suddenly fed, the food feels divine. The taste is heightened, the relief overwhelming, the gratitude immense. The manipulator knows this. They know that their absence increases their value in your eyes. By retreating, they amplify their worth. By returning, they make you believe you have been saved. Real-life examples of this cycle can be found in toxic relationships everywhere. A partner who disappears for days, ignoring calls and messages, only to show up with flowers and tenderness. A friend who goes silent for weeks, leaving you questioning your importance, then reappears with laughter and closeness as if no time has passed. Even family members can play this cycle, retreating into cold distance, only to flood you with affection during reunions, making you overlook the pain of abandonment. Psychologically, this taps into what behavioral science calls intermittent reinforcement. The same principle that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the machine will pay out, but the uncertainty itself keeps you hooked. The unpredictability of affection, sometimes absent, sometimes overflowing, conditions you to chase the high of reunion, no matter how much the absence hurts. You begin to crave the warmth more than you resent the cold. The danger is that this cycle distorts your sense of love. You begin to believe that intensity equals intimacy, that longing equals loyalty, that craving equals connection. You forget what steady, calm love feels like. You dismiss consistency as boring, stability as dull. And so, you become trapped, mistaking manipulation for magic. But there is a way out. The key is recognition. When you see that the warmth feels intoxicating only because of the deliberate coldness that came before, you start to separate genuine affection from manufactured craving. You learn to value presence that does not require absence as fuel. You realize that love should not feel like withdrawal and relapse. It should feel like steady nourishment, not starvation and feasting. The absence craving cycle thrives on contrast, on creating emotional starvation, so that the return feels like salvation. But true love, true friendship, true connection, these do not vanish to prove their worth. They remain, steady and unwavering. Breaking free means refusing to mistake inconsistency for passion and learning that real intimacy is not about the hunger of absence, but the quiet security of presence. Gift obligation bind. There's a darker side to generosity that few people talk about. On the surface, it looks like kindness. Someone gives you an extravagant gift, something so thoughtful, so expensive, so overwhelming, that you feel a rush of gratitude. You tell yourself they must truly care, because who else would go this far just for you? But beneath that shining surface hides a trap. The gift isn't free. It's a leash. What feels like generosity is often the beginning of the gift obligation bind. This manipulation works because gifts carry unspoken rules in human psychology. From the earliest societies, reciprocity has been one of the strongest social bonds. If someone gives, you feel compelled to give back. It's hardwired into us. But manipulators exploit that instinct, twisting it until your gratitude becomes obedience. Suddenly, the gift stops being about kindness. It becomes a contract. And the debt never seems to expire. Think of a partner who showers you with lavish presents, jewelry, gadgets, a dream vacation. At first, it's dazzling. But weeks later, when they demand your time, your silence, your compliance, they remind you, explicitly or implicitly, of all they've given. After everything I do for you, this is how you treat me? The message is clear. The price of the gift is your freedom. Each wrapped box was not love, but currency in advance for control. Or picture a family dynamic. A parent pays for everything. The house, the car, the bills, the education. Outwardly, it looks like devotion, but the child soon realizes every decision, every relationship, every step in life must now pass through that parent's approval. The child dares not refuse, because the weight of those past gifts looms over every choice. The love feels conditional, the generosity like chains. Independence becomes betrayal, and gratitude becomes servitude. The corporate world is no stranger to this bind either. A boss treats you to extravagant dinners, tickets to events, or special favors that no one else receives. At first, it feels like privilege. But later, when you're asked to stay late, break rules, or keep quiet about unethical practices, you hesitate to say no. After all, didn't they take care of you? Didn't they go out of their way for you? The unspoken expectation is clear. Repay compliance for kindness received. And the more you accept, the tighter the bind becomes. What makes the gift obligation bind so insidious is that it weaponizes joy. A genuine gift should make you feel free, loved, appreciated. But here, joy is poisoned with strings. You find yourself questioning your own intentions. Am I grateful enough? Do I owe them more than I can ever repay? The manipulator doesn't need to force you. You chain yourself with guilt. That's the brilliance of the trap. You become both the prisoner and the guard. And the gifts often escalate. A small present here, a generous gesture there, soon followed by something too large to ignore. The bigger the gift, the heavier the debt. You begin to feel like walking away would make you ungrateful, selfish, even cruel. They've engineered a moral trap where refusal feels immoral and compliance feels inevitable. But here's the cruelest twist. When you finally resist, they flip the script. They paint you as the betrayer, the user, the one who took advantage of their kindness. To outsiders, their narrative seems plausible. After all, didn't they give you so much? This isolates you further, because not only do you feel indebted, but you also feel judged. The bind doesn't just tie you to them. It cuts you off from others who might see the truth. Breaking free requires a painful realization. A true gift expects nothing in return. Real generosity liberates. It doesn't enslave. If love or friendship comes wrapped in price tags hidden inside ribbons, it isn't love at all. It's control. Escaping the bind means confronting the guilt, reclaiming your right to say no, and recognizing that gratitude doesn't mean surrender. Because the gift obligation bind is never about the object given. It's about ownership of your choices. The only way to sever it is to see the gift for what it truly was. Not an offering, but a bargain you never agreed to. And once you see that clearly, you'll realize the greatest gift you can give yourself is freedom from the chains of someone else's generosity turned weapon. Puzzle piece dependence. Imagine someone holding up a mirror, but instead of showing you your whole reflection, they carve out a missing piece. They convince you that this missing piece is them. They whisper, sometimes gently, sometimes urgently, that without them, you are unfinished, broken, incomplete. And over time, you begin to believe it. You start to see yourself not as a full human being, but as a puzzle with one crucial piece always held in their hand. This is puzzle piece dependence, where a relationship is made to feel less like a choice and more like survival. At first, it doesn't look like control. It looks like intimacy. They might say things that sound romantic, like, "You're my other half," or, "Without you, I'd be nothing." In the early glow of affection, it feels flattering, even magical. But then the message flips, and you begin to feel that you are the one who would collapse without them. Every subtle comment, every look, every sigh reinforces the idea that your worth is tied to their presence. You start to imagine that without them, you wouldn't just lose love, you would lose yourself. The psychology of this trap is brutal in its simplicity. Humans crave connection. From birth, our nervous systems are wired to bond, to feel safer with others. But puzzle piece dependence twists that wiring. It tells you safety doesn't come from connection. It comes only from this person. If you leave, the implication is that you'll unravel. It's not just about losing a partner. It's about losing your sense of being whole. And when your very identity feels bound to someone else, walking away feels like cutting off oxygen. Think of a young man whose partner constantly reminded him, "You'd never survive without me. You'd never find anyone who understands you the way I do." Over months, he began to internalize this voice. When she left the room, he felt anxious. When she traveled, he felt hollow, as if a vital organ were missing. His friends noticed he had changed, less confident, more hesitant, always seeking reassurance. He didn't realize it, but he had been conditioned to view himself as half a person, only functional when completed by her approval. Or imagine a woman whose partner built her up only to tear her down. "You're so smart," he'd say, "but you'd be so lost without me. I'm the one who helps you make the right decisions." Slowly, she began to doubt her own judgment. Even small choices, what to eat, what to wear, what job to apply for, felt paralyzing without his input. He had positioned himself as the missing puzzle piece that gave shape to her life. Without him, She feared she would collapse into chaos. Biologically, this manipulation preys on a core fear embedded in all of us: abandonment. Our ancestors survived in tribes. Isolation meant death. When someone convinces you that leaving them equals being abandoned, your nervous system reacts as if your very survival is at stake. Cortisol rises, anxiety takes over, and your body screams to cling tighter, to never let go. It's not rational, it's primal. And that's why puzzle piece dependence feels less like romance and more like oxygen deprivation. You don't want them, you need them, or at least that's what you're led to believe. The tragedy is that people caught in this cycle often forget they were whole before. They had strengths, talents, dreams, and identities that existed long before this person. But the constant drip of suggestion, "You're nothing without me. We're two halves of one soul. No one else will ever complete you," erodes that memory. Slowly, they rewrite your self-concept until your wholeness is unimaginable without their presence. It's a form of psychological colonization. They stake a claim over your self-worth and plant their flag in the very core of who you believe you are. And because they frame themselves as the missing piece, you don't even see the theft. You see it as salvation. But here's the hidden truth. No one is a puzzle piece. You were not born incomplete. You are not missing parts waiting to be supplied by another person. Love should not make you feel like survival. It should make you feel expansive, safe, and whole. A relationship is meant to be two full people walking side by side, not two fragments clutching each other out of fear of shattering. The hardest part of breaking free is daring to see yourself as already complete. That means reclaiming the decisions you've been told you can't make alone, reminding yourself of the life you lived before, and resisting the panic that whispers you'll crumble without them. It feels terrifying at first, like stepping into emptiness. But what you discover is that the emptiness was an illusion. The missing piece was never real. So ask yourself, who benefits when you believe you're incomplete? Who gains power when you think you cannot breathe without them? And what would happen if you rejected the puzzle entirely and remembered you were whole from the very beginning? Future promise suspension. They look into your eyes and whisper about the life you'll build together. The dream house, the travels, the family, the career you'll both grow side by side. They paint pictures so vivid you can almost feel them. Warm mornings, golden sunsets, a perfect future waiting just ahead. And for a while, those promises feel like hope. They keep you believing, keep you enduring, keep you tied. But the cruel truth is this: those promises are not meant to be fulfilled. They're meant to suspend you, holding you in an unsatisfying present with the illusion of a brighter tomorrow. This is the future promise suspension, a trap where hope itself becomes the cage. At first, it feels inspiring. You tell yourself, yes, things aren't perfect now, but look at what's coming. Look at what will be. Every disappointment in the present gets patched over with the belief that it's only temporary, that the struggle is just a prelude to the beauty ahead. But days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. And the promises are always soon. Soon we'll move into that better place. Soon I'll treat you the way you deserve. Soon everything will change. Yet soon never comes. You're left clinging to words like lifeboats, even as the water rises around you. This tactic works because hope is powerful. Hope has kept civilizations alive, fueled revolutions, and carried people through impossible suffering. It is the strongest medicine and the sweetest drug. But in the wrong hands, it becomes a leash. Because if someone knows how much you crave that future, they can weaponize it against you. They don't have to make the present bearable. They only have to convince you it's temporary. And so you wait. You forgive. You excuse. You sacrifice. Not for today, but for tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Think of the lovers who endure neglect because their partner swears they'll change when the time is right. Think of employees who remain in dead-end jobs because they're promised a promotion that never comes. Think of friendships where one person keeps saying, "One day we'll do all the things we've dreamed of," while in reality, they never show up in the present. The pattern is the same: vague, glittering futures used to cover the emptiness of now. The tragedy is not just the lost time, it's the erosion of trust in yourself. Because each time the future doesn't arrive, you doubt your own perception. Maybe you're being impatient. Maybe it's your fault for expecting too much. Maybe you just need to hold on a little longer. And this self-doubt is exactly what the manipulator counts on. As long as you keep questioning yourself, you'll never question them. As long as you believe the problem is your timing, not their dishonesty, you'll stay suspended in their cycle. Psychologically, this trap functions like an endless deferred reward system. It taps into the same mechanism as gambling or addictive pursuits, the belief that the next turn, the next spin, the next chance will bring the jackpot. And like gamblers who pour their life savings into machines that never pay out, people caught in the future promise suspension invest years of their lives waiting for someday. By the time they realize someday is a mirage, much of their energy has already been drained. But here is the truth. A real future is always built in the present. If someone is unwilling to show up now, they will not suddenly transform later. If the present is filled with neglect, with broken words, with avoidance, then the future they describe is not a promise. It's a performance. A story designed to keep you anchored where you are. And love, career, friendship, none of these thrive on stories alone. They thrive on action, on consistency, on effort in the here and now. Ask yourself this. Are the words you hear matched by actions today? Does the person who promises you a lifetime of joy bring you even a fragment of it now? Does the partner who swears you'll be cherished tomorrow show you respect in the present? Does the boss who promises future rewards value you today? If the answer is no, then you're not being prepared for a future, you're being suspended in a lie. History echoes with examples of this trap. Leaders who kept populations subdued with visions of golden ages that never arrived. Charismatic figures who told followers to endure hardship for the paradise that was just ahead. Even literature is filled with characters who wait endlessly for someone else's tomorrow, until they realize too late that their own life slipped away while they were waiting. The warning has always been there. A promise without present action is not hope, it is manipulation. Breaking free requires a shift in perspective. It means refusing to judge a relationship or opportunity by the words of tomorrow, and instead demanding the evidence of today. It means recognizing that love is proven in daily gestures, not in distant dreams. It means realizing that if the present is unbearable, the future will not magically redeem it. And most of all, it means reclaiming your time, because time is the one currency that never returns once it is spent. The danger of the future promise suspension is that it feels safer than walking away. Hope is comfortable, even when it hurts. But comfort can be a coffin, and the longer you stay, the harder it is to imagine life beyond the suspension. Yet outside of it lies the freedom to create a future not dangled before you by someone else, but built with your own two hands in the present moment. So the next time someone paints you a perfect tomorrow, stop and ask, what are they giving me today? Because tomorrow never comes. It only ever transforms into another today. And if today is empty, tomorrow will be too. Real love, real respect, real commitment, they don't suspend you. They root themselves in now. They grow from daily action, not distant dreams. And when you find someone who shows up for you in the present, you'll never need to cling to the promises of a future that never arrives. Because the proof will already be here, in every moment, in every choice, in every today. Conflict reconciliation rush. At first, it feels like passion. The fire, the intensity, the arguments that seem to come out of nowhere. One minute you're laughing, the next you're on opposite sides of a battlefield, words cutting like knives, emotions spiraling higher than reason can control. They accuse, they provoke, they twist. And you find yourself pulled into the storm, defending, explaining, shouting back even when you swore you never would. The fight feels real, so real it consumes you. You wonder, how did we get here again? And then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm breaks. They soften, they reach for you. They say the words that soothe the wounds they just inflicted. The tears turn into kisses, the distance collapses into closeness, and you feel relief so intense, it almost feels like love. This is the conflict reconciliation rush. The cycle is not about resolution, it is about chemistry. The fight isn't an accident, it's the spark that ignites the rush. Neurologically, it works like this. The conflict floods you with stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, the chemical signatures of alarm. Your body tenses, your mind sharpens, your heart races. Then comes the reconciliation, and with it, a surge of dopamine, oxytocin, and relief. The contrast between pain and comfort makes the makeup feel euphoric. You confuse survival with intimacy, chemical release with genuine connection. It's not peace you're experiencing, it's withdrawal relief. Like a gambler who loses all night, then wins one lucky hand. You chase that intoxicating high again and again, even as the losses pile up. The pattern looks like love because the reconciliation is drenched in tenderness. After the fight, they hold you tighter, kiss you deeper, promise they'll never let it happen again. And in those moments, you believe them, because your brain craves the soothing that follows the chaos. But the truth is, if there were no fight, there would be no miraculous healing. The high exists only because the low was manufactured. Without realizing it, you begin to equate pain with proof. You tell yourself, if they didn't care this much, we wouldn't fight this hard. You mistake volatility for depth, turbulence for passion. Examples of this dynamic are everywhere. In relationships, it looks like the couple who are constantly breaking up and making up, feeding on the intensity of collapse and reunion. In friendships, it can appear as constant dramatic fallouts that are later patched over with grand gestures of loyalty. Even in family dynamics, the same loop emerges. Parents who ignite conflict only to swoop in as comforters, making the child dependent on their dual role as both wound and healer. The rush is always the same. An artificial roller coaster that tricks you into clinging tighter to the very source of your instability. What makes this loop so dangerous is that it rewires your sense of normal. When calmness feels boring, when peace feels suspicious, when silence feels like distance, you know you've been trained by the cycle. You begin to seek the chaos because only chaos leads to the euphoric reunion. Without realizing it, you become complicit, provoking fights yourself just to feel the relief of reconciliation. And so the loop deepens, not because you love the fighting, but because you've become addicted to the making up. Breaking free demands a brutal honesty, to admit that what feels like passion is actually a drug. The euphoria is real, yes, but it is chemically engineered by the pain that preceded it. It is not love, it is a roller coaster designed to keep you strapped in. Real intimacy does not require you to be shattered just so you can be glued back together. Real love does not manufacture wounds just so it can offer the cure. The conflict reconciliation rush thrives on contrast. It convinces you that the intensity of reunion is proof of something special. But intensity is not the same as stability. Fire can warm, but it can also burn. And if you confuse the burn for proof of heat, you'll never step away from the flames. The truth is simple. Love that must break you to make you whole is not love. It is dependency disguised as passion. And when you finally step out of the loop, when you taste peace that doesn't need to be earned through chaos, you realize how false the rush truly was. Because reconciliation without war feels quieter, but infinitely more real. And once you experience that, you never crave the rush again. You crave the calm you should have had all along. Cold-warm oscillation. They look at you with frozen eyes, their voice clipped, their body distant, as if you never mattered. You feel the cold spread through you, not just absence, but rejection. They turn conversations into silence, warmth into indifference, affection into ice. You question everything. Did you say the wrong thing? Did you do something to deserve this? The silence bites deeper than words ever could. And just when you've adjusted to the chill, when you've begun to feel numb, they shift. Suddenly, they're warm again. Their tone softens, their eyes shine with affection, their touch lingers like comfort you've been starving for. The cold vanishes as if it never existed, replaced by sweetness so powerful it feels like a rescue. This is the cold-warm oscillation, a cycle designed not to love you, but to destabilize you. The brilliance of this manipulation is in the unpredictability. Humans thrive on consistency. Our nervous systems seek patterns to feel safe. But when those patterns are broken in calculated ways, your brain enters survival mode. The cold phase triggers fear and insecurity. You feel rejected, unloved, abandoned. Then the warmth floods back, creating relief, release, and an addictive high. The contrast between the two states magnifies the intensity of both. You don't just feel loved, you feel saved. You don't just feel neglected, you feel destroyed. This swing from one extreme to the other keeps you emotionally unstable, unable to trust your own footing. This oscillation mimics the mechanics of addiction. Behavioral psychology calls it intermittent reinforcement. Just like gamblers pull slot machine levers, Never knowing when the jackpot will come, you remain hooked on the possibility of warmth. The icy periods become tolerable because you believe the heat will return. And when it does, it feels so rewarding that you cling even tighter, convincing yourself that the love must be real because it feels so intense. You fail to see that the intensity is not proof of love. It is proof of manipulation. Imagine a pendulum. On one side, icy rejection. On the other, intoxicating warmth. You are the one tied to the string, forced to swing back and forth, powerless to stop the motion. The person pulling the strings controls the rhythm. Cold when they want distance, warmth when they want closeness. You live not by your own stability, but by their oscillation. Consider a toxic partner who ignores your messages for days, acting distant, dismissive, and cold. You spiral with doubt, wondering if the relationship is ending. Then suddenly, they return with affection, calling you, praising you, showering you with tenderness. The reunion feels like relief, like proof they still care. But soon enough, the warmth fades, and the cycle begins again. Or imagine a friend who alternates between belittling you in one breath and gushing with compliments in the next. You never know which version of them you will meet, so you stay alert, invested, hooked, waiting for the warmth. The psychological toll of cold-warm oscillation is profound. It erodes your self-trust. You begin to doubt your own perceptions. Was the cold really as cruel as it felt? Was the warmth genuine, or just another trick? You cling to the warmth as evidence of love, dismissing the cold as misunderstandings or flaws. Slowly, you train yourself to accept instability as normal and unpredictability as passion. You confuse chaos for depth. The manipulator thrives on this. By keeping you off balance, they ensure your focus remains on them. You spend your energy anticipating their shifts rather than questioning the relationship itself. They create a storm and then play the savior when the sun breaks through. The instability is the point, because an unstable mind is easier to control. Breaking this cycle requires one painful but liberating realization. Consistency is the true measure of love. Warmth that follows cold is not a gift, it is a strategy. Genuine affection doesn't need to alternate with cruelty to prove its worth. Real love does not feel like relief after torment. It feels like safety in every moment. The cold-warm oscillation is designed to make you addicted to inconsistency. It hooks you on the relief of warmth after the pain of cold, training you to tolerate the cruelty just for the chance of sweetness. But once you see it for what it is, the spell weakens. You begin to understand that real intimacy doesn't swing like a pendulum. It remains steady, calm, and true. Rule break exception trap. There's a certain thrill when someone looks you in the eye and says, "I never do this for anyone else. But for you, I'll make an exception." It sounds intoxicating. Suddenly, you feel chosen, different, elevated above the rest. But beneath that glittering illusion lies one of the most manipulative games of control, the rule break exception trap. This tactic preys on the deepest human desire to feel special. When someone claims they've bent their rigid rules, sacrificed their boundaries, or betrayed their own standards just for you, your mind interprets it as proof of love, loyalty, or trust. But in reality, it's not freedom they're giving you. It's a tighter leash. You've been tricked into believing that your privilege is rare, when in fact it's a calculated strategy to make you grateful, indebted, and compliant. Imagine a strict parent who says, "I never let your siblings stay out late, but I'll let you because I trust you more." At first, it feels like trust, but in truth, it's a performance. The child feels so flattered that they comply more readily with future demands, terrified of losing that special status. The parent hasn't loosened control, they've deepened it, making obedience tied to identity. Disobey, and you're not just breaking a rule, you're betraying the gift of being chosen. Or think about a toxic relationship where one partner sets rigid boundaries. "I don't lend money, I don't tolerate mistakes, I don't let anyone in." Then, when they break those very rules for you, it feels like love on steroids. They've carved out an exception in their iron wall, and you're the only one inside. But later, when they demand sacrifice, silence, or unquestioning loyalty, you hesitate to resist. After all, they gave up so much of themselves for you. In reality, their rule-breaking wasn't a gift. It was bait. Even in the workplace, this trap thrives. A boss might enforce strict company policies, yet quietly bend them to favor you. Extra perks, leniency, or insider access. You feel like the golden employee, protected and privileged. But soon, you realize that privilege comes with invisible chains. When asked to cover extra shifts, overlook shady practices, or stay silent about unfairness, you comply, not out of duty, but out of fear of losing your special exception. They've weaponized favoritism, turning your gratitude into control. What makes this trap so dangerous is how it rewires your self-image. You begin to believe you're unique, above the rules, cherished beyond measure. And once that belief takes root, you'll do almost anything to protect it. The manipulator doesn't need to enforce the rules anymore. Your fear of losing their exception enforces it for them. That's the genius of the tactic. You become complicit in your own control, clinging to the privilege that shackles you. And here lies the most sinister twist. You're never truly the exception. The same person who whispered, "I never do this for anyone else," has likely whispered the same to many before you, and will to many after. The illusion of uniqueness is mass-produced, a recycled script tailored to every target. But once you've internalized it, the damage is done. You guard the illusion like a treasure, blind to the fact that it was never real. The rule break exception trap works because it masquerades as intimacy. We want to believe someone would rewrite their rules just for us. It feels like proof of devotion, proof of worth. But in truth, devotion that demands obedience isn't love, it's ownership. The price of feeling special becomes silence, submission, and self-betrayal. Breaking free requires seeing the manipulation for what it is, a false currency. True love doesn't require exceptions. It creates freedom without conditions. Genuine care doesn't manipulate you with rarity. It supports you without hidden contracts. The moment you stop clinging to the illusion of being the chosen one, you strip away the power of those fake exceptions. Because the harsh truth is this: if someone has to break their own rules to prove your worth, then your worth was never the point. Control was. And once you recognize that, the most powerful move you can make is to step away, not from the exception they dangled before you, but from the entire trap they built around you. Transformation praise loop. They tell you that you've changed, and for a moment it feels like the highest compliment. They praise you for being calmer, softer, easier to deal with. They admire how you no longer argue, how you've become more understanding, how you've stopped questioning things that once mattered deeply to you. And yet, somewhere in the silence of your own mind, a question lingers. Have you actually grown, or have you simply disappeared? This is the transformation praise loop, where the approval you receive for becoming better is really a reward for erasing the parts of yourself that made you whole. It begins subtly. They notice small differences in your behavior. Maybe you stop bringing up the subjects that always caused fights. Maybe you laugh less loudly because they once mocked you for being too much. Maybe you start dressing in a way they prefer, or censoring your opinions because they always found them a little harsh. And when you do, they beam at you. They tell you they're proud of you, that they love how much you've grown, that you're finally becoming the person they always knew you could be. You want to believe this is progress. After all, who doesn't crave acknowledgement? But the praise isn't for becoming more of yourself. It's for becoming less. Psychologists call this a reinforcement trap. When a behavior is met with reward, it's repeated. In healthy relationships, that means being praised for being authentic, courageous, compassionate, or resilient. In unhealthy ones, the reinforcement is twisted. The reward comes when you suppress, shrink, or conform. Over time, the brain wires itself to associate approval with self-erasure. You stop asking, "Am I being true to myself?" and start asking, "Am I being good enough for them?" Take the story of a woman whose partner always said he loved how much she had matured. At first, she took pride in it. But what he really meant was that she no longer confronted him when he flirted with others, no longer questioned his spending, no longer asserted her needs. He praised her for being chill and laid back, when in reality, she was just exhausted from the endless arguments. She wasn't maturing, she was surrendering. His praise made the surrender feel like progress. Or consider a man who used to be passionate about painting, loud music, and political debates. His partner often rolled her eyes, telling him he was too intense, too opinionated, too eccentric. Over time, he toned himself down. He sold his paints, stopped bringing up politics, played softer songs. When he did, she told him he was becoming so much more balanced, that she loved this new version of him. He smiled, but inside he felt hollow. The version she praised was not new. It was simply stripped down, edited, diminished. The more he conformed, the more approval he earned. The less he resembled himself, the more lovable he became. The transformation praise loop is powerful because it disguises itself as encouragement. Who would ever question being told they're better now? But when the better is defined by another person's comfort instead of your own growth, it's not encouragement, it's control. It's a kind of sculpting where you are slowly chiseled down until only the parts that please them remain. And when you dare to slip back into your true self, to raise your voice, to state your needs, to take up space, they withdraw the praise. They may even scold you, implying you're regressing, ruining the progress you've made. Biologically, this creates a reward-punishment cycle. Dopamine fires when you're praised. Cortisol spikes when approval is withheld. Your nervous system learns that peace and affection come only when you conform, and tension comes when you resist. Over time, the loop conditions you to preemptively erase yourself just to avoid the pain of disapproval. You no longer wait for the reward. You've internalized the script so deeply that you suppress yourself automatically. This is how identities collapse quietly. People on the outside may say, "You've really changed," and they're not wrong. But what they don't see is that the change wasn't chosen, it was coerced. They see a calmer version of you. You feel a smaller version of you. They see peace. You feel absence. And yet, because the transformation was dressed in praise, you struggle to call it what it truly is: erasure. The most devastating effect of this loop is that it corrupts your relationship with growth itself. You start to mistrust your own evolution. You wonder, am I genuinely improving, or am I just becoming who they want me to be? You second-guess whether your progress is authentic or just survival. Even when you break free, it takes years to reclaim your own growth from the shadow of someone else's praise. To escape the transformation praise loop, you have to turn the mirror back on yourself. You have to ask, is this change making me more alive, more whole, more free? Or is it making me quieter, smaller, easier to control? Real growth expands your essence. False growth erases it. And the most radical act of self-rescue may simply be to declare, I was never incomplete. I was never in need of their edits. The parts of me they silenced are not flaws, they are truths. So the haunting question is this: how much of the better version of you that others applaud is really you? And how much of it is the ashes of who you used to be, burned down so someone else could feel comfortable? Layered vulnerability bait. They open up to you. Not casually, not in passing, but deeply. They tell you about the heartbreaks that shattered them, the childhood scars they never healed from, the secret fears they've never confessed to anyone else. And in that moment, you feel chosen, special, trusted. You feel as though you've been invited into the hidden chambers of their soul. But what you don't see right away is that this opening isn't only about closeness, it's bait. Because soon, the very vulnerability that drew you in becomes the chain that keeps you tied. This is layered vulnerability bait, the tactic where wounds are revealed not to heal, but to hook. It works because empathy is one of the strongest forces we carry. When someone shows us their pain, our instinct is to protect, to comfort, to stay. We want to be the person who finally makes it better for them. And so we invest our time, our energy, our patience. We overlook red flags because, after all, they're wounded. We silence our own needs because, after all, they're suffering. We compromise our boundaries because, after all, they've been through so much already. And in that quiet surrender, we step into their trap. The layers of vulnerability come slowly, like peeling back an onion. First, it's a small story about an old betrayal. Then, a confession about family abandonment. Then, a dark moment where they thought about giving up. Each revelation makes you feel like you're going deeper into their world, becoming indispensable. And that's the illusion, that you've been chosen to save them. But the truth is, their pain has become the script, and you've been cast in the role of caretaker. Your empathy isn't honored, it's used as leverage. You start to notice the shifts. When you try to set a boundary, they remind you of how broken they are. When you pull away, they reveal another wound to pull you back in. When you express your own hurt, somehow it gets overshadowed by theirs. because their pain is always greater, always deeper, always demanding more. You begin to feel guilty for even having needs of your own. And so you stay silent, sacrificing little pieces of yourself to hold them together. They never had to demand your loyalty outright. You gave it freely, because they convinced you it was cruel to leave someone who had already suffered so much. This tactic is insidious because it doesn't look like manipulation at first. On the surface, it looks like intimacy. People always tell us that vulnerability builds connection, that honesty and openness are the foundations of trust. And that's true when vulnerability is genuine. But layered vulnerability bait is not about honesty. It's about strategy. The wounds are real, but the timing, the depth, the dramatic reveal, they're calculated to bind you, to make you feel like leaving would be abandoning someone who finally trusted you. And once that hook is in, they can keep tugging at it whenever they sense you slipping away. Think about relationships where this plays out. The partner who constantly recounts their tragic past whenever you confront them about the way they treat you. The friend who floods you with stories of trauma whenever you try to create distance. The colleague who uses tales of burnout and betrayal to excuse repeated failures. In every case, their pain becomes the shield against accountability and the weapon that keeps you in place. Psychologically, this tactic exploits what's called the empathy trap. Humans are wired to respond to vulnerability with care. We feel guilty for abandoning someone who seems fragile. But manipulators understand this instinct and learn how to exploit it. They stack layers of vulnerability not to build closeness, but to build obligation. And the more layers you peel back, the deeper you're entangled. The cost of staying in this trap is heavy. You begin to lose yourself in their wounds. You stop sharing your own struggles because they pale in comparison. You stop pursuing your own needs because there's always feel more urgent. And over time, you start to resent the very empathy that once felt like your strength. What once made you compassionate begins to feel like a chain. But here's the truth. Real vulnerability is not a weapon. Real vulnerability is reciprocal, balanced, and healing. It doesn't silence your needs. It makes space for them. It doesn't guilt you into staying. It inspires you to stay willingly. The difference lies in the aftermath. If you walk away from a vulnerable conversation feeling closer, safer, more free, that's authenticity. If you walk away feeling burdened, guilty, or trapped, that's bait. So how do you break free? You start by recognizing the pattern. Ask yourself, do they share their wounds to connect or to control? Do I feel like I have the freedom to leave, or do I feel guilt trapped into staying? Do my needs matter in this relationship, or are they always eclipsed by their pain? If the answers lean toward guilt and imbalance, you're not building intimacy. You're being manipulated. The hardest part is accepting that even real pain can be used manipulatively. Just because someone has suffered does not mean they have the right to control you with their suffering. Just because someone has been broken does not mean you are obligated to be their glue. Compassion has limits, and when it begins to destroy you, it is no longer compassion. It is self-sacrifice in a game you never agreed to play. Layered vulnerability bait thrives on silence, on your inability to say, I cannot carry this for you. The moment you name it, the spell weakens. The moment you set boundaries, the chains begin to loosen. And the moment you recognize that love and manipulation can coexist in the same words, you can step back and reclaim your empathy for those who truly honor it. So the next time someone opens their wounds before you, listen carefully, not just to the story, but to what follows. Do they invite you into mutual trust, or do they use it as leverage? Do you feel stronger together, or weaker beneath their weight? Because true vulnerability frees both people. False vulnerability traps one. And when you learn to tell the difference, you'll never mistake a chain for closeness again. Loyalty test spiral. It begins so subtly you barely notice. A small favor asked here, a reassurance requested there. At first, it feels natural. After all, relationships thrive on loyalty, don't they? But then the requests start to change shape. They're no longer about mutual support. They're about proof. Proof that you're devoted, proof that you'll stay, proof that you're willing to bend just a little further than last time. What begins as a simple, would you do this for me, soon grows into, if you really care about me, you will. And before you know it, you're caught in the loyalty test spiral, an endless cycle where each demand becomes harsher, each test more consuming, each proof more costly than the last. The psychology of it is insidious. Each time you comply, you reinforce the idea that your devotion can and must be measured through sacrifice. Say yes to the first test, and the baseline shifts. What was once extraordinary becomes expected. What was once a display of love becomes the bare minimum. And because the previous test was passed, the next must escalate. The spiral feeds on escalation. A skipped social event becomes cutting off friends. A minor financial favor becomes major financial dependency. A small secret kept for them becomes bigger lies told on their behalf. The tests grow like fire fed by oxygen, consuming everything until there's nothing left untouched. What makes the spiral so effective is the emotional leverage tied to it. They don't present the test as control. They present it as a measure of your love, your loyalty, your character. And because no one wants to be seen as unloving, unfaithful, or weak, you comply. You tell yourself, this is just what relationships demand. But underneath, there's a gnawing unease. Why does loyalty have to be proven in ways that diminish you? Why does devotion have to be purchased at the cost of your freedom, your boundaries, your integrity? The deeper tragedy is that the spiral exploits our primal fear of abandonment. Every test carries the implied threat. If you fail, I will leave, I will withdraw, I will punish. And so the spiral tightens. You convince yourself that passing the test means security, that this sacrifice is the last one you'll have to make. But it never is. The satisfaction of proving yourself is fleeting, and almost immediately, the ground shifts beneath your feet and a new test is set. The spiral does not end because it is not designed to end. It is designed to control. We see this pattern in toxic relationships, where partners slowly erode each other's independence under the guise of loyalty. In friendships, it can appear as endless demonstrations of allegiance, each one more unreasonable than the last. Even in professional dynamics, loyalty spirals can take shape, employers demanding sacrifices of time, energy, or ethics as the price of belonging. In every form, the outcome is the same. A person so worn down by constant proof that they forget loyalty should not be tested, it should be trusted. The loyalty test spiral is also reinforced by guilt and fear. When you hesitate, they say, if you really cared, this wouldn't be hard for you. When you resist, they accuse, you're not the person I thought you were. And so you start questioning yourself, wondering if your hesitation means you're disloyal, if your boundaries mean you don't love enough. You begin to carry their accusations like a mirror, reflecting back a distorted image of yourself as selfish or untrustworthy. This is the psychological trap. The spiral convinces you that failing the test means failing the relationship, when in reality, the relationship fails you the moment loyalty becomes something you have to constantly prove. Breaking free begins with one terrifying truth. Loyalty that demands proof is not loyalty. It is ownership. Real devotion does not need endless demonstrations. Real trust does not require sacrifice after sacrifice. To step out of the spiral, you must see each test for what it truly is, a manipulation, a tool to chip away at your independence until nothing remains. You must ask yourself, what happens if I say no? Because the answer reveals everything. If no ends the bond, then the bond was never built on loyalty, it was built on control. The most haunting part of the loyalty test spiral is that it masquerades as love. It tells you that the harsher the test, the deeper the devotion. But love does not measure itself in pain, in loss, in compliance. Love does not set traps to catch you failing. And the moment you realize that, the spiral unravels. You see that true loyalty is not something demanded, not something proven under pressure, but something that grows naturally in the space where freedom and trust exist. And so the lesson is clear. The spiral only spins as long as you let it. The moment you stop proving, the moment you stop sacrificing pieces of yourself for their approval, the wheel halts. You step off, battered perhaps, but free. And in that freedom, you rediscover the truth. Loyalty, the kind that matters, is not sculpted by tests. It is revealed in trust. Gentle undermining cycle, they start small. A slight comment about how you always forget things. A raised eyebrow when you share an idea. A gentle laugh at your expense, disguised as a joke. Nothing cruel enough to call out directly, but sharp enough to sting. Over time, these tiny cuts accumulate, and you begin to doubt yourself. The gentle undermining cycle is born, not through open attacks, but through carefully measured words and gestures that slowly erode your confidence, until their approval feels like the only thing keeping you whole. At first, you brush it off. Everyone makes jokes, everyone slips. But the remarks keep coming. They correct you when it isn't necessary. They question your memory, your decisions, your skills. They remind you of your past mistakes and moments when you're trying to move forward. And because it's all delivered softly, wrapped in humor, phrased as concern, spoken with a smile, you hesitate to label it as harm. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You let it slide again and again. But the effect is cumulative. A steady drip of doubt, day after day, conditions your mind. Eventually, you start second-guessing your own abilities before they even say anything. Their voice becomes internalized, echoing in your thoughts. The confidence you once carried begins to fracture. And here lies the cruel genius of the cycle. After chipping away at your self-belief, they become the one person whose praise feels like salvation. Suddenly, their compliments hit you like lightning. When they finally say, "You actually did a good job this time," it feels monumental. The relief is intoxicating. The same person who made you doubt yourself is now the one who lifts you up, and the contrast makes their validation feel priceless. You cling to it, crave it, seek it. Without realizing it, your self-worth has been rewired to depend on their approval. This is the essence of the gentle undermining cycle. They create the wound, then offer the bandage. They lower your confidence, then raise you up just enough to keep you tethered to them. Their praise doesn't just feel good, it feels necessary. You start believing you need them to feel competent, attractive, valuable. And because the cycle is subtle, it's easy to miss. It doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like a strange blend of criticism and care, correction and encouragement. But underneath, it's control. Imagine a sculptor who takes a statue and chips away small pieces each day. Eventually, the statue weakens, loses its shape. But then, every so often, the sculptor polishes the surface, making the statue shine for a moment. The statue looks to the sculptor as its savior, never realizing that the same hands both damaged and restored it. That's what this cycle does. It convinces you that the destroyer is also the healer. Real-life examples are everywhere. In romantic relationships, a partner might casually remark that you're not very good with money, only to later praise you when you handle a small expense correctly. In friendships, someone might constantly tease you about your clumsiness, then glowingly compliment you when you manage not to trip. In the workplace, a boss might nitpick every detail of your performance, only to lavish praise when you finally meet their impossible standards. Each example follows the same arc, steady undermining followed by selective approval, which makes the approval feel like a drug. Psychologically, this cycle works because of contrast. When your confidence is consistently eroded, your baseline of self-worth drops. A compliment that would have felt ordinary from anyone else suddenly feels extraordinary from the one who has made you starve for it. This is similar to love bombing, but inverted. Rather than overwhelming you with affection from the start, they weaken you with doubt so that their affection feels larger than life. The danger is that you stop trusting yourself. You no longer believe your own instincts, achievements, or strengths unless they confirm them. Your identity bends around their perception of you. And once you're dependent on their praise, they hold the reins to your self-esteem. They decide when you feel strong and when you feel weak. They control the rhythm of your confidence like a puppeteer pulling strings. Breaking free requires reclaiming your own voice. You have to recognize the pattern, the small jokes, the subtle digs, the conditional praise. You have to see that their compliments are not gifts of love, but mechanisms of control. And most importantly, you have to rebuild your self-worth from within so that it no longer rises and falls on the tide of their approval. True confidence doesn't rely on someone else lowering you first. It exists independent of their validation. The gentle undermining cycle thrives in silence, in your willingness to laugh off the comments, to minimize the cuts, to tell yourself it's nothing. But when you call it by its name, when you see that the same person chipping away at you is the one feeding you crumbs of praise, the illusion shatters. You realize you don't need their approval to stand tall. You were whole before they began chiseling you down. And once you remember that, their cycle loses all its power. Hero-savior illusion. There's a kind of manipulation that feels almost noble, like a mission you were born to fulfill. It's the hero-savior illusion. It begins when someone convinces you, directly or indirectly, that your love is the only thing holding them together. That without you, they'd collapse into chaos, addiction, despair, or even self-destruction. And in that moment, your role shifts. You're no longer just a partner, a friend, or a companion. You've become their lifeline, their anchor, their healer. But what feels like purpose is often a prison. This illusion works because it taps into one of the deepest emotional drives, the desire to matter, to rescue, to heal. When they share their brokenness, through trembling confessions, late-night tears, or stories of past betrayals, you feel chosen for a sacred duty. You're not just loved. You're essential. You're the one who keeps the darkness at bay. And for a time, that feeling intoxicates you. You believe your presence has meaning that transcends ordinary relationships. But soon, that belief is twisted into a burden too heavy to carry. Imagine a partner who confesses, "Without you, I'd fall apart. You're the only reason I'm still alive." At first, your heart swells with compassion. You double your efforts to care, to comfort, to protect. But slowly, every disagreement, every moment of distance, becomes charged with unbearable weight. If you falter, they might spiral. If you leave, they might shatter. You stop living for yourself and start living as their emotional shield. Your love isn't free anymore. It's conscripted. The trap tightens when they deliberately magnify their wounds. They remind you of their trauma, their suffering, their scars, reinforcing the idea that they're fragile and you are their medicine. And whenever you think of stepping back, guilt floods in. How could you abandon them? How could you take away their only source of hope? That guilt keeps you tethered, even when exhaustion is hollowing you out from within. This illusion thrives in its cycle of crisis and relief. They sink into despair, you rush in to save them. They cling to you in gratitude, and you feel like a hero again. But the cycle never ends. They don't truly heal, because healing would break the bond. Instead, they remain suspended in perpetual brokenness, just enough to need you, just enough to keep you hooked. And the cruelest part? Your very efforts to save them become the reason you can't leave. You've invested too much. You've built your identity around being their savior. Walking away would feel like betrayal, not only of them, but of the role you've come to embody. Think of the countless stories of toxic relationships where one partner sacrifices everything, their time, their dreams, their health, because they believe their love is the other's only hope. Outsiders see the manipulation clearly. The broken partner is using despair as a leash, chaining the rescuer with guilt and duty. But to the one inside, it feels holy. Like love means suffering, and leaving means murder. The hero-savior illusion isn't confined to romance. It shows up in friendships where one person constantly lives in chaos, leaning on the other to save them from every disaster. It appears in families, where a sibling or child is positioned as the only one who can calm the storm of another's rage or despair. In every form, the illusion operates the same way. Your worth is tied to their brokenness, and their brokenness ensures your captivity. The tragedy is that this illusion doesn't just trap you, it traps them. If their survival depends on you, they never take responsibility for themselves. Why would they, when the savior is always waiting? Dependency replaces growth, and both of you become prisoners, one to despair, the other to duty. Breaking free requires a radical shift. It means realizing that love is not the same as rescue. Compassion is not the same as captivity. Healing is not something you can force into another person. It's something they must choose for themselves. The hardest truth is this: if your love is the only thing keeping someone alive, then they're not really living. They're surviving off your sacrifice. And that isn't salvation. It's symbiosis turned toxic. True love doesn't demand that you bleed to keep someone else breathing. It doesn't make you a crutch. It makes you a partner. It doesn't hold you hostage with guilt. It frees both people to grow. The hero-savior illusion promises glory but delivers exhaustion. And the moment you see through it, you reclaim not only your freedom, but also the possibility that they might finally face their darkness on their own. Because the greatest act of love is not chaining yourself to their wounds. It's stepping back, even if it breaks your heart, and letting them discover that the only person who can truly save them has always been themselves. Withdrawal punishment loop, they don't scream. They don't slam doors. They don't even have to argue. Instead, they simply withdraw. A sudden silence. A cold shoulder. A gaze that once overflowed with warmth now sharp as ice. You feel the temperature of the entire room shift. And what was your crime? You didn't comply. You didn't bend. You didn't obey. This is the withdrawal punishment loop, an invisible cage where affection is given and taken not as love, but as a leash. At first, the pattern is hard to spot. They shower you with love when you act in ways that please them, when you agree, when you sacrifice, when you put their needs above your own. In those moments, you feel adored, cherished, chosen. But the second you step out of line, even in small ways, say no, express a boundary, assert your independence, that affection vanishes. The laughter dies. The compliments stop. The touch that once anchored you disappears. They don't yell, but the emptiness is louder than any scream. And because humans are wired to fear emotional abandonment, you panic. You scramble to win the warmth back. Without even realizing it, you start performing obedience just to avoid the ache of being shut out. This works because our brains are built to crave connection. Love is not just an emotion, it's survival. The withdrawal of affection triggers the same circuits as physical pain. Studies show that social rejection activates the brain like a burn or a wound. And so, when affection is withheld, it doesn't feel like a simple shift in mood. It feels like starvation. And when affection returns, even briefly, it floods you with dopamine, relief, safety. This is the same loop that keeps gamblers hooked to machines. Unpredictable rewards following unbearable losses. You never know when the warmth will return, but when it does, the high is intoxicating. Take the story of a woman who once stood up to her partner about visiting her family. He wanted her to cancel. She said she needed to go. For 3 days, he didn't speak to her. No texts, no affection, not even eye contact. The silence cut deeper than any insult. She felt invisible, abandoned. And when he finally softened, touched her hand, told her he forgave her, the relief was overwhelming. She didn't argue again for months. Not because she had changed her mind, but because the withdrawal had trained her to equate disagreement with exile. Or think of a man whose partner pulled away whenever he failed to meet her demands. Less attention, less praise, less service. If he didn't comply, she would retreat into icy detachment. And then, when he corrected himself, she returned with kisses and gratitude, reinforcing the idea that obedience equaled love. He began anticipating her moods, silencing his own needs, reshaping his personality. Over time, he was not living as himself. He was living as her reflection, molded by her approval. The cruelty of the withdrawal punishment loop is that it never leaves bruises. From the outside, the relationship may even look peaceful. No shouting matches, no overt abuse. But the silence itself becomes the weapon. It is the absence of love that carves into the psyche, leaving scars no one else can see. Victims often describe feeling as if they're walking on eggshells, terrified of missteps that will trigger the next freeze. Life becomes a performance, and the reward for perfect obedience is simply not being abandoned. This loop erodes your sense of self in the most insidious way. When love is conditional, you begin to internalize the belief that you are conditional, that your worth exists only when you conform, that love can be taken at any moment, so you must always prove yourself to deserve it. Over time, you lose the ability to distinguish genuine affection from manipulation. You cling harder to the very person who withholds from you, because the moments of warmth become rare treasures. But here's the hidden truth. Love is not supposed to be a reward for obedience. Real love does not vanish when you assert yourself, when you disagree, when you dare to be whole. Real love may struggle, may stumble, but it does not condition affection on control. The withdrawal punishment loop is not love, it is training. It is compliance disguised as devotion. It is silence weaponized into chains. Breaking free means enduring the pain of withdrawal long enough to see it for what it is. It means realizing that the cold shoulder is not a reflection of your worth, but a tactic to bend you. And it means relearning that your voice, your boundaries, your independence do not make you unlovable. They make you real. So ask yourself, when the warmth disappears, do you believe you stopped deserving love? Or is it possible the love was never real to begin with? And if affection must be earned by obedience, is it truly affection? Or is it just another cage built from silence? Thought implant rotation, they don't tell you who you are. That would be too obvious. Instead, they tell you who you should be. They slip ideas into your mind like seeds, ideas dressed as encouragement, as inspiration, as guidance. You'd be so much stronger if you weren't so sensitive. You'd really shine if you were more confident. You'd be amazing if you worked harder, dressed better, spoke differently. At first, it sounds like support, like someone who sees potential in you. But here is the twist. Those ideas are not neutral, they are implants. And once you begin living them out, they reward you. They praise you for becoming what they suggested, making you feel as though the change was your choice, when in truth, it was theirs. This is the thought implant rotation, a cycle of subtle manipulation that reshapes who you are without you realizing it. It works because praise is powerful. Human beings are wired to chase approval. From childhood, we learn to bask in the glow of recognition and to avoid the sting of disapproval. Parents, teachers, friends, society. Our sense of self grows in relation to the reflections we receive. The manipulator knows this. They know that if they plant an idea about who you should be and then praise you when you conform, they don't have to command you. You will command yourself. The rotation begins quietly. They implant the thought, a subtle hint that you're lacking, or that there's a better version of you waiting to emerge. Then, they sit back and watch. The next time you act in alignment with their suggestion, they shower you with approval. See? That's the strong side of you I love. That's exactly who you were meant to be. I knew you had it in you. And the praise feels so validating that you keep going, repeating the behavior, shaping yourself into the mold they've offered. What you don't see is that your identity has begun to orbit around their vision, not your own. Imagine a friend who constantly says, "You're too quiet. You'd be so much more fun if you spoke up." The next time you act louder, they laugh, clap you on the back, and make you feel like you've finally arrived. Or a partner who insists, "You'd be so much more attractive if you worked out." When you start exercising, they light up, telling you how proud they are. It feels like growth, but it's growth designed to meet their approval, not your truth. And over time, these implanted thoughts begin to crowd out your own sense of identity. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who do they want me to be?" This cycle is dangerous because it disguises itself as love and encouragement. Most of us want people around us who push us to grow, who challenge us to become better. But the difference is intent. Real encouragement comes from a place of support. You are free to grow or not, and your worth remains intact either way. Thought implant rotation comes from control. Your worth rises or falls depending on how well you match the blueprint they've drawn for you. And when approval becomes conditional, identity becomes a performance. Psychologists describe this as a form of identity conditioning. Like Pavlov's dog salivating at a bell, you begin to crave the reward of praise and fear the withdrawal of affection. You internalize their implanted vision so deeply that you can't tell where they end and you begin. And that is the ultimate goal of the manipulator, not just to influence your actions, but to colonize your very sense of self. History is full of this tactic. Propaganda campaigns tell citizens who they should be, loyal, obedient, sacrificial, and then reward those who embody those traits with honor, medals, or recognition. Parents, knowingly or unknowingly, sometimes do this to children, praising only the traits that match their own desires while ignoring or criticizing the child's natural inclinations. In relationships, partners build entire systems of conditional love around implanted expectations, ensuring that the other person never quite feels free to just be. The most insidious part is how deeply the trap gets inside your own mind. You begin to gaslight yourself. You tell yourself, "I wanted to change. I chose this." And maybe you did, but the seed wasn't yours. It was planted, nurtured, and rewarded by someone else. And over time, you may wake up and realize you've built a life that reflects someone else's vision, while your own dreams lie abandoned. The way out is not easy, because it requires peeling back layers of identity to ask, which thoughts are truly mine? Which versions of me are born of my own values, my own desires, my own truths, and which were shaped by the desire to be praised, to be accepted, to be loved? That question can be unsettling, even painful, because it means admitting that parts of your life may not belong to you at all. But that recognition is the beginning of freedom. Real love, real friendship, real guidance does not implant thoughts to be lived out. It invites, it supports, it encourages, but it never makes your worth conditional on becoming someone else's vision. Real encouragement celebrates you as you are, even while standing beside you as you grow. It doesn't punish you for failing to conform to a script you never wrote. So the next time someone tells you who you should be, pause. Ask yourself, is this guidance, or is this an implant? Do they love me when I remain myself, or only when I move closer to their design? Because praise is not always proof of love. Sometimes, it is proof of control. And once you see the rotation for what it is, the cycle of implanted ideas and conditional approval, you can step outside it. You can begin to write your own script, to plant your own seeds, to live a life that doesn't depend on someone else's applause. And when you do, you'll realize something powerful. The truest version of you never needed permission, never needed approval, never needed praise to exist. It only needed the space to breathe without someone else's hand shaping its form. Love debt spiral. It starts with kindness. A gift you didn't ask for, a favor offered without warning, a sacrifice made in the name of love. You thank them, you feel warmed by it, even grateful. At first, it feels like generosity, like someone going out of their way to show they care. But then something shifts. The kindness is no longer free. It comes with invisible strings, an unspoken contract you never signed. They begin to remind you, gently at first, remember when I did this for you? Remember what I gave up? And suddenly you realize that every act of love, every gesture of care, has been tallied, stored away like entries in a ledger. What once felt like affection now feels like debt. You are no longer simply loved. You are owned by obligation. This is the love-debt spiral. The power of this spiral lies in its disguise. On the surface, it looks like devotion. They do so much for you. How could you not appreciate them? But beneath the surface, the generosity is poisoned by expectation. Each act becomes a loan, and you are the debtor. You begin to feel watched, measured, evaluated not by who you are, but by how well you repay. If you forget to acknowledge their sacrifice, you're made to feel ungrateful. If you can't return the gesture in equal measure, you're made to feel selfish. And if you try to resist, you're reminded, sometimes sweetly, sometimes with bitterness, of everything you owe. What makes this cycle so destructive is the way it warps genuine love into transaction. True love gives because it wants to, not because it demands a return. But in the love-debt spiral, every kindness is an investment, every act a down payment on future compliance. Over time, you stop feeling joy when they do something nice for you, because you know the bill will come due later. You begin bracing for the reminder, the guilt, the manipulation. The warmth of being cared for turns cold, because care has been replaced by accounting. The spiral escalates because the tally never resets. A favor from last week, a sacrifice from last year, even an act from the very beginning of the relationship, none of it expires. They hoard these memories like currency, ready to be cashed in whenever you resist or hesitate. And the more you accept, the heavier the ledger grows, until you're buried under the weight of debts you never agreed to carry. You find yourself saying yes to things you don't want, agreeing to boundaries you shouldn't cross, just to lighten the burden of what you owe. We see this dynamic in relationships where one partner constantly reminds the other of the sacrifices they've made. After everything I've done for you, how can you say no? In families, it can sound like, I raised you. I gave up my life for you. You owe me your obedience. In friendships, it becomes, remember all the times I was there for you? You can't abandon me now. Even in workplaces, bosses use the same tactic. Look at all the opportunities one gave you. Now you should go above and beyond. Across all these contexts, the love-debt spiral traps people in cycles of guilt and compliance, mistaking fear of debt for genuine devotion. The danger is not only in what you lose externally, your time, your choices, your freedom, but in what you lose internally. You stop seeing love as something warm and safe, and start seeing it as something heavy and costly. You begin to believe that affection must always be repaid, that nothing is ever freely given, that even kindness is a transaction. This corrodes your ability to trust, to relax, to feel cared for without suspicion. Even when someone truly does love you freely, part of you hesitates, waiting for the tally to be revealed. The spiral doesn't just bind you to the manipulator, it poisons your future connections too. Breaking free requires seeing the ledger for what it is, a weapon, not a record. If someone constantly reminds you of what they've done, it means they didn't give freely, they traded. And you do not owe repayment for trades you never agreed to make. Love cannot be counted, and the moment someone turns it into numbers, it ceases to be love. The antidote is reclaiming your boundaries, refusing to treat affection as debt, refusing to let guilt dictate your choices. Yes, gratitude matters, but gratitude is not the same as servitude. To love is to give without strings, and to receive without fear of repayment. The love debt spiral convinces you that you will always be in the red, that no matter how much you give back, it will never be enough. And that is true, because the spiral was never designed to balance. It was designed to keep you small, to keep you compliant, to keep you believing that love is a prison built out of favors. But love is not a prison, and it is not a ledger. Love does not bind, it frees. And the moment you see that clearly, the debt vanishes, because it was never real to begin with. Reality rewrite cycle. They tell you it didn't happen the way you remember. Their voice is calm, steady, almost condescending, as though they're correcting a child who misheard. You recall the sting of their words, the sharpness of their actions, the way you felt crushed in the moment. But they shake their head, insisting it wasn't like that. They say you exaggerated, you misinterpreted, you overreacted. At first, you defend your memory. You cling to what you know you experienced. But their certainty wears you down. Their retelling is so confident, so precise, that you start to question yourself. This is the reality rewrite cycle, a pattern where truth is bent, memory is fractured, and your own perception is turned against you. The cycle begins with an incident, an argument, a betrayal, a cruel remark. You walk away with the sting fresh, convinced of what happened. But when you confront them, they deny, twist, or reframe the details. Suddenly, their hurtful words were just a joke. Their anger was not that bad. Their absence was all in your head. They don't just deny their wrongdoing. They rewrite the script itself. And because memory is fragile, you begin to waver. Did you overreact? Did you mishear? The more you protest, the more they double down, until their version starts to overwrite your own. Over time, this rewriting becomes a pattern. Every conflict, every betrayal, every wound is slowly resculpted in their narrative. They chip away at your certainty, until your mind is filled not with your own memories, but with their curated story. The frightening truth is that the human brain is suggestible. When someone repeats a version of events with confidence, your memory can shift to accommodate it. Psychologists call this memory conformity. Your brain adapts, not to reality, but to persuasion. And once your memories are altered, your sense of self weakens. If you cannot trust your own perception, you are forced to trust theirs. This is the essence of the reality rewrite cycle. You are bound not by chains, but by narrative. You surrender your truth for theirs, because theirs feels more certain, more stable. And the more you depend on their version, the harder it becomes to break free. Imagine it like walking through a hall of mirrors. At first, you know the reflection is distorted. But as you spend more time inside, the warped images begin to feel normal. You forget what your face truly looked like. Eventually, when they tell you, this is who you are, this is what really happened, you believe them, because your own vision no longer feels reliable. Real-life examples are chilling. In relationships, a partner may hurl insults during a fight, leaving you in tears. Later, when you bring it up, they insist, I never said that. You're imagining things. Or worse, they claim you were the one who lashed out. Slowly, you stop trusting your recall of events. In families, a parent might deny years of neglect, reframing your childhood as happy and normal, even though you remember loneliness. Over time, you wonder if your pain was fabricated. In workplaces, a manipulative boss may gaslight employees by rewriting project timelines, insisting mistakes were never theirs but always yours. If you dare to disagree, they remind you how unreliable your memory supposedly is. The cycle works because it feeds on your doubt. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. And every time you recall an event, the memory can be reshaped. When someone confidently offers you a corrected version, especially someone you trust or fear, your brain can adopt it as truth. Their certainty becomes your reality. The more it happens, the less you believe in your own judgment, until you cling to theirs like an anchor. The consequences are devastating. You begin to distrust your instincts, silence your protests, and surrender your autonomy. You stop fighting back because you're no longer sure what you're fighting for. They tell you who you are, what happened, and why you're wrong. And slowly, you accept it, not because it feels right, but because it feels easier than battling your own doubt. But here's the escape. Truth leaves scars. Deep down, your body remembers what your mind is taught to forget. The way your heart raced during their cruelty, the tears you shed, the emptiness that followed. These are anchors of reality. When the narrative no longer matches the ache inside you, you begin to see the cracks in their story. Healing begins by trusting those cracks, by honoring the memories you were told to abandon. The reality rewrite cycle binds you by erasing your truth and replacing it with theirs. But memory, even when bent, carries echoes of authenticity. To break free, you must reclaim those echoes, no matter how faint. Because the moment you say, "I know what I felt, I know what I lived," you step out of their story and back into your own. Emotional roller trap. There's a form of control that doesn't come with chains or locks. It comes with a ride. One moment, you're soaring. The next, you're plummeting. And the person beside you is the one who built the track. This is the emotional roller trap. A cycle of unpredictable highs and lows designed to keep you addicted to one thing. The fleeting stability they promise, but never freely give. At first, it feels intoxicating. They shower you with affection, attention, and praise, making you feel like you've finally found the connection you've been searching for. Then, just as suddenly, they withdraw. Coldness, silence, criticism. The crash hits you harder than you expected because the contrast is brutal. And just when you're at your lowest, they flip the switch again. Another surge of warmth, another rush of closeness. The whiplash is dizzying, but the relief is so powerful you cling to it, desperate for the next high. This trap works because it rewires your nervous system. Unpredictability is more addictive than consistency. Just like a gambler pulling a slot machine lever, you never know when the reward will come, but when it does, it floods your brain with dopamine. That surge locks you in, making the pain of the lows worth enduring for the sake of the highs. You're not choosing them anymore. You're chasing the next hit of emotional stability, which only they can grant. Think of a relationship where every good morning text, every affectionate gesture, feels like sunlight after days of storm. You forgive the coldness, the cruelty, the neglect, because when they finally turn back toward you, the relief is overwhelming. It convinces you the bond is worth saving, even though it's the same person creating both the storm and the shelter. They don't give you stability. They manufacture chaos, then sell you calm as if it were a gift. The emotional roller trap thrives in its contrast. The highs feel higher because the lows are devastating. A simple apology after days of silence feels like a grand reconciliation. A small compliment after a week of criticism feels like pure adoration. Your standards shift. What should be normal, steady affection, mutual respect, now feels extraordinary. And soon, you're no longer asking for happiness. You're just begging for the ride to stop. This manipulation is especially powerful because it keeps you questioning yourself. In the low moments, you wonder if you caused it, if you said the wrong thing, failed in some invisible way. In the high moments, you feel validated, believing the love is real, because who would go to such extremes if they didn't care? The truth is, the extremes are the point. By destabilizing your emotions, they anchor your identity to their approval. You can't feel steady without their permission. This cycle doesn't just exist in romance. In families, a parent may swing from loving praise to cold rejection, teaching a child to crave scraps of validation. In workplaces, a boss may alternate between belittling criticism and sudden recognition, keeping employees hooked on unpredictable approval. In each case, the roller coaster becomes the prison. The ride never ends, and the only one controlling the brakes is the manipulator. And here lies the darkest twist. The longer you ride, the harder it is to step off. You start to confuse chaos with passion, intensity with love, volatility with depth. You tell yourself that real love must be dramatic, stormy, full of fire. But the truth is, it's not passion you're feeling. It's trauma disguised as connection. The rush isn't love. It's relief from pain you should never have been put through in the first place. Breaking free requires seeing the ride for what it is, not a love story, but a control mechanism. Stability isn't something you should have to earn. Respect isn't a prize for endurance. Love that demands you survive storms just to taste sunlight is not love, it's manipulation. The moment you recognize that the roller coaster was built to keep you strapped in, you can step off the track and reclaim what they tried to own: your peace, your balance, your ability to breathe without waiting for permission. Because the real lesson of the emotional roller trap is this: love isn't supposed to feel like a carnival ride. It's supposed to feel like solid ground. And once you remember that, you'll stop craving the highs they use to control you and start demanding the steady peace you always deserved. Vulnerability weaponization. You open your heart, and for a moment, you feel safe. You share the secret you've never told anyone, the fear that haunts you, the mistake that scars you, the memory that still aches like it happened yesterday. You tell them because you believe love is built on honesty. You believe trust means vulnerability. And they listen. They nod. They may even comfort you. But later, when the balance of power shifts, they take that same secret and sharpen it into a blade. This is vulnerability weaponization, when the very truths you revealed in trust are turned against you, not to hold you, but to control you. At first, it doesn't look like betrayal. It looks like intimacy. They encourage you to share, to open up, to confess your doubts, your fears, your darkest corners. They create the illusion of safety, convincing you that transparency is love. And in those early moments, it feels healing. You finally feel seen. But then, in an argument, in a moment of conflict, in a moment where they want to win, they pull your secret out like ammunition. The words you once whispered with trembling honesty are hurled back at you with venom. Suddenly, what made you human is being used to make you small. Psychologically, this works because secrets carry power. When we confess them, we create a sacred bond. I give you this part of me because I trust you not to use it against me. When that bond is violated, it doesn't just feel like an argument, it feels like annihilation. You don't just lose trust in them, you lose trust in yourself. You ask, why did I ever open up? Why did I ever believe I was safe? And that shame makes you quieter, more careful, more obedient. You share less, you question yourself more, and ironically, you cling harder to the very person who betrayed you, because now they know too much to let go. Take the story of a woman who once confided in her partner about a teenage mistake, something she had carried for years. He held her hand and promised it didn't change how he saw her. But in every fight afterward, he slipped it into his arsenal. No wonder you messed that up. Look at your past. Each time, it broke her a little more. Not because she hadn't forgiven herself, but because she thought she had finally found someone who would never use it against her. Or think of a man who shared his childhood traumas, the pain of growing up in a home where affection was rare. His partner soothed him when he cried. But later, whenever he needed reassurance, she sneered. You're just needy because your parents never loved you. What had once been a source of tenderness became a choke chain around his neck. He stayed, not because he didn't see the cruelty, but because he felt exposed. He thought, she knows everything about me. If I leave, what will she do with it? His own vulnerability became his prison. Biologically, betrayal at this level destabilizes the nervous system. Vulnerability is supposed to trigger oxytocin, the bonding hormone that deepens intimacy. But when it is weaponized, the brain begins to associate openness with danger. The result is a constant state of vigilance. You begin scanning every word, every confession, every expression of weakness, fearing how it might later be used against you. Instead of intimacy bringing closeness, it now brings control. The cruelty of vulnerability weaponization is that it doesn't just hurt once, it echoes. Even if the relationship ends, people often struggle to trust again. They hold back in new relationships, unable to open up, terrified that every new partner will eventually turn intimacy into ammunition. The scars outlast the relationship, shaping how a person connects for years to come. And yet, here is the truth. Sharing your secrets was never the mistake. The mistake was believing that someone who uses them against you ever deserved them in the first place. Real love honors vulnerability. It doesn't twist it. Real love listens, holds, and protects. It never places your wounds on a stage, never uses them as leverage, never makes you regret being human. Escaping this loop begins with reclaiming your secrets, with realizing that what you share does not diminish you and cannot be used to define you. Your past, your mistakes, your pain, none of it is evidence of weakness. It is evidence of survival. And no matter who tries to weaponize it, the truth is this: your story belongs to you, not to the person who twisted it into chains. So the question remains, if someone only values your vulnerability when it gives them power, was it ever love at all? Or was it always control, hiding behind the mask of intimacy? Grand gesture disguise. They arrive with flowers, with fireworks, with declarations so loud the whole world can hear. They plan surprises, public displays, candlelit scenes that feel like pages from a storybook. And in those moments, it feels undeniable. This must be love. Who else would go to such lengths? Who else would create such grand spectacles? But what you don't see right away is the disguise. Because those gestures are not always born of devotion. They are sometimes meant to cover something else. To erase the memory of a wound. To distract you from the pain that lingers when the spotlight fades. This is the grand gesture disguise. The art of using romance as camouflage for deeper harm. It works because human beings are drawn to symbols. We are taught to measure love by its performance. How big the gift is, how dramatic the surprise, how cinematic the gesture. Stories tell us that when someone stands in the rain holding flowers or confesses their heart in front of a crowd, it must mean the love is real. And so when we are hurting, when a partner has wounded us, betrayed us, or diminished us, these grand gestures feel like proof that everything is fine. They buy forgiveness. They silence suspicion. They allow harm to hide behind spectacle. The cycle begins with injury. A cruel word, a broken promise, a pattern of neglect. You feel the sting, the doubt, the emptiness. And just when the weight becomes unbearable, they appear with something dazzling. A trip, a gift, a public apology wrapped in charm. The scale of the gesture overwhelms your hurt, replacing it with awe. And for a while, you forget. You even tell yourself, how could someone go to such lengths if they didn't truly love me? But the question you forget to ask is, why did the harm need to be covered in the first place? Think about it. A bouquet of roses can't erase the nights of silence. A weekend getaway doesn't undo months of neglect. A ring, a speech, a grand performance. None of these repair the fractures left by deeper wounds. But when the gesture is big enough, dramatic enough, it creates an emotional high. A flood of oxytocin and dopamine that clouds judgment. The manipulator knows this. They know that your brain will cling to the spectacle, the symbol, the movie scene memory, far more than it will cling to the quiet moments of harm. And so they keep repeating the cycle. Injury, then spectacle, then forgiveness. History is filled with this tactic. Kings and rulers built monuments, held festivals, and staged elaborate shows to distract their people from injustice and cruelty. Celebrities make grand donations after scandals, shifting the spotlight from what they did wrong to what they gave away. On smaller scales, toxic relationships mirror the same pattern. A partner cheats, but then stages a tearful proposal in front of friends. A spouse erupts in anger, but then throws a lavish anniversary celebration. The world sees devotion. You feel the glow of spectacle. But underneath, the harm remains unhealed. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the alternating rhythm of harm and reward. The very unpredictability of it makes the bond stronger. You endure the lows because you're conditioned to believe a spectacular high will follow. You wait, you forgive, you hope, because the next grand gesture might be just around the corner. And so you stay, caught not in genuine love, but in the roller coaster of performance and pain. But here is the truth. Love is not proven in how loudly it shouts, but in how quietly it cares. Real love is not found in the fireworks, but in the consistent warmth of daily respect. The grand gesture disguise hides this fact. It makes you equate love with drama, when true love is found in steadiness. It makes you forgive harm because the apology looks like a fairy tale, when a true apology would be lived out, not staged. Breaking free means asking the harder questions. When the flowers fade, how are you treated? When the crowd is gone, how do they speak to you? When there are no gifts, no surprises, no public scenes, do you still feel valued? Do you feel safe? Do you feel seen? If the answer is no, then the grand gestures are not proof of love. They are distractions from the lack of it. The cost of staying in this cycle is steep. You begin to crave spectacle just to feel reassured. You excuse harm because you're waiting for the apology in grand form. You start to believe that suffering is part of the story, that the hurt is worth it because the performance that follows feels so beautiful. But that is not love. That is conditioning. That is harm hidden in roses, cruelty wrapped in ribbons. Real love doesn't need disguises. It doesn't need to perform devotion in front of others to cover what it destroys in private. Real love apologizes with action, not with glitter. It heals with consistency, not with one-time spectacles. It grows quietly, like roots deep in the ground, not like fireworks that flare and disappear. So the next time someone dazzles you with a grand romantic display, ask yourself, is this an expression of love or a mask over injury? Is this gift building a future or burying a wound? Because love that needs to hide behind spectacle is not love at all, it is theater. And once you see through the disguise, you will never again confuse performance with devotion. Freedom security trade. It begins with words that sound comforting. I just want to keep you safe. I only worry because I love you. If you really trust me, you'll let me protect you. At first, it feels like devotion, like someone cares enough to shield you from harm. They frame their rules and restrictions as gifts, wrapping control in the language of care. The curfews, the constant check-ins, the limits on who you see or where you go, they all come dressed as proof of love. And because love longs for security, you convince yourself to accept it. But what you don't realize is that every yes is a trade of your freedom for their version of safety, a trade that feels small in the moment, but over time, strips you of the very self that love was meant to hold. This is the freedom security trade. Psychologically, it preys on one of our deepest desires, the need to feel safe in a chaotic world. Safety is one of the most powerful currencies in human connection. And when someone says, I'll give you safety, but only if you surrender this part of yourself, it doesn't feel like control, it feels like protection. At first, it's just small boundaries dressed as care. Don't talk to that person, they might hurt you. Don't take that trip, it's too dangerous. Don't dress that way, people might not respect you. And each time you comply, they reward you with affection, reassurance, warmth. The lesson is clear. The less free you are, the more loved you'll feel. The more you surrender, the safer you'll be. But this is the lie at the heart of the trade. Love should never require shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's fortress. Real safety is not about walls. It is about trust. Yet in the freedom security trade, the fortress grows taller, the walls thicker, and you find yourself locked inside. What started as reassurance turns into surveillance. What began as protection turns into possession. You begin to lose not only your choices, but your identity. You forget what it felt like to move freely, to decide without fear of disapproval. And the most haunting part is that you believe this is love because they told you so. This cycle appears everywhere. In intimate relationships, a partner may call it caring when they isolate you from friends, monitor your messages, or demand constant updates. In families, it can appear as parents who restrict every decision in the name of keeping you safe, leaving children unable to build their own lives. Even in larger systems, political, cultural, religious, the same trade is offered. Give up freedoms, and we'll give you protection. It's the same psychology on every scale. The illusion that safety can only be bought by surrendering autonomy. The freedom security trade works because it exploits fear. Fear of loss, fear of danger, fear of being abandoned or harmed. When fear rises, freedom feels negotiable. You begin to tell yourself, maybe this is what love requires. Maybe this is the price of being cherished. But love that costs your freedom isn't security, it's a cage. And cages, no matter how carefully padded, remain cages. The damage of living inside this trade is not only external, but internal. Over time, you stop asking what you want. You measure your steps by what will keep you safe in their eyes. You lose the ability to trust your own choices, your own instincts. Your freedom doesn't just disappear, it erodes silently, until you no longer remember you had it. And when you no longer feel free, even their love feels less like comfort and more like captivity. Breaking free requires redefining what security means. True security is not about control, it's about trust. It's not about someone else making you smaller. It's about being fully yourself and still being accepted. Real love does not demand you give up freedom to feel safe. Real love gives you safety because you are free. And until you see that difference, the trade will keep tempting you. The truth is, freedom and love are not opposites. They are partners. Without freedom, security is hollow. Without security, freedom feels fragile. But together, they form the ground on which real intimacy can stand. Anyone who tells you to trade one for the other has already failed to give you either. So remember, the freedom-security trade is not a bargain. It's a trap. Love that confines you is not love. Safety that costs your freedom is not safety. And once you recognize that, you stop choosing the cage, no matter how beautifully it's decorated. Because in the end, real love does not protect you by limiting you. It protects you by letting you soar. This narration is about 5,300 characters. Paste. Jealousy passion mask. They tell you it's because they care. The way they check your phone, the way they question who you were talking to, the way their mood darkens when you laugh too freely with someone else. It's all, they claim, because they love you too much. They frame their suspicion as passion, their possessiveness as devotion. And in the beginning, it can feel intoxicating. You tell yourself, they're jealous because they don't want to lose me. They're protective because I matter that much. But slowly, the jealousy passion mask reveals itself. What feels like love at first is control dressed in romance. The cycle begins with small moments, questions that sound harmless. Who was that? Why did they look at you like that? Why didn't you answer right away? The undertone isn't obvious yet, and you interpret it as interest, even flattery. After all, doesn't it feel good to be wanted so intensely? To be noticed so carefully? But the questions sharpen over time. What was once curiosity becomes interrogation. What was once framed as concern becomes accusation. And every moment of your life begins to feel monitored, dissected, doubted. The mask works because it weaponizes your desire to be loved deeply. Humans crave significance. We long to matter so much to someone that they fear losing us. And jealousy, when disguised as passion, taps directly into that longing. You mistake insecurity for intensity, surveillance for sincerity. You start to equate suspicion with depth, as if their inability to trust is somehow proof of the depth of their heart. But beneath the mask lies a darker truth. Jealousy is not love, it is fear wrapped in possession. True love delights in your freedom, celebrates your connections, and trusts in your loyalty. Possessiveness, on the other hand, demands your world shrink until it fits only them. The jealousy passion mask convinces you that the walls closing in around you are actually signs of safety, when in fact they are bars of a cage. Real-life examples play out in countless toxic relationships. A partner insists you shouldn't spend time with certain friends, claiming, "I just care about you too much to let you be around them." Another insists you shouldn't wear certain clothes because it drives me crazy when people look at you. "I love you too much to handle it." At first, you comply, thinking it's a small sacrifice for love. But with each compromise, your freedom shrinks. Before long, you're isolated, controlled, and convinced that their jealousy is a twisted form of romance. Psychologically, this manipulation thrives on confusion. It blurs the line between protection and possession. You are taught to see their insecurity as your responsibility, their mistrust as your proof of loyalty. And because they often balance their suspicion with bursts of affection, apologies, passionate declarations, dramatic gestures, you become trapped in a loop where the pain of jealousy is soothed by the illusion of love. The cycle deepens, and you start to feel guilty for wanting independence, as though freedom itself is betrayal. The cost is heavy. Over time, you lose pieces of yourself. Your world becomes smaller, your confidence weaker, your trust in your own judgment fractured. You find yourself apologizing for things you never did, sacrificing friendships, hobbies, even parts of your identity, all in the name of proving love. Yet no amount of proof ever satisfies the jealous heart, because jealousy is not about you. It is about their own fear and need for control. Breaking free requires seeing the mask for what it is. Love does not demand constant surveillance. Love does not wither in the presence of your independence. Love does not disguise insecurity as devotion. Real passion is not about clinging tighter, it is about trusting deeper. The moment you realize that their jealousy is not love, but control painted in the colors of romance, you begin to reclaim yourself. The jealousy passion mask thrives on your desire to feel cherished. But once you recognize that true love does not suffocate, It empowers. You tear away the disguise. And underneath, what's left is not devotion, but fear, possession, and insecurity. Love that demands your imprisonment is not love at all. And the freedom to walk away, to breathe, to exist without suspicion, that is where real passion lives. Surprise expectation loop. There's a form of manipulation that wears the mask of romance, generosity, and thoughtfulness. It's called the surprise expectation loop. At first, it feels like magic. Someone showers you with unexpected gifts, spontaneous trips, surprise gestures of affection. Your heart leaps, your guard melts, and you feel like the luckiest person alive. But soon, you realize every surprise comes with an invisible price tag, the expectation that you must match it, repay it, or somehow exceed it. What started as delight becomes debt. What looked like love becomes a scoreboard. This loop begins innocently. Imagine someone bringing you flowers for no reason, planning a surprise dinner, or sending you a heartfelt letter. In the moment, it feels pure. But then the comments creep in. I wonder what you'll do for me. Or, I always go out of my way for you, but you never do the same. Suddenly, you're no longer basking in the joy of the gift. You're anxiously calculating how to reciprocate. Their generosity wasn't free. It was a down payment on your future compliance. Think of a partner who constantly plans elaborate surprises. A weekend getaway, an expensive gift, a dramatic gesture in front of friends. At first, you're overwhelmed with gratitude. But beneath the surface, the pattern emerges. If your response doesn't measure up, if you don't surprise them in return, or if your effort seems smaller, you're guilt, criticized, or made to feel inadequate. The surprise wasn't about love. It was about creating a standard you can never consistently reach, ensuring that you always feel like you're falling short. This cycle works because it exploits the unspoken rule of reciprocity. Humans are wired to repay kindness. When someone goes out of their way for us, we feel a deep obligation to give back. But manipulators twist this instinct into a trap, turning every surprise into leverage. The gift isn't about joy, it's about control. And the more extravagant the surprise, the heavier the expectation that follows. Families are fertile ground for this loop. A parent may surprise their child with something big, paying for a car, funding a trip, covering an expense. At first, the child feels gratitude. But soon, every choice in life becomes a battlefield. The parent expects compliance, obedience, even silence about their own faults. Because after everything I've done for you, how dare you? The surprise becomes a chain. Gratitude becomes servitude. Workplaces use it too. A boss might surprise an employee with a bonus, a special favor, or public recognition. But later, when unreasonable demands arrive, long hours, silence about unfair practices, the unspoken pressure kicks in. Remember how much I've done for you. The surprise wasn't about generosity. It was about planting a future claim. The surprise expectation loop is especially dangerous because it blurs the line between love and performance. You begin to measure your worth not by who you are, but by what you can give back. You're caught in a constant state of anxiety, asking yourself, am I doing enough? Am I giving enough? Am I proving my love the way they prove theirs? And in that anxiety, you lose the very thing true love is built on, freedom. What makes this loop even more sinister is how it rewrites your definition of love. Instead of steady care, mutual respect, and genuine presence, you start to equate love with theatrics, spectacle, and constant effort. Normal affection feels too small. Quiet presence feels inadequate. You become trapped in a cycle of escalating gestures, never allowed to rest, never allowed to simply be. Breaking free means recognizing the difference between a gift and a bargain. Real surprises, real gestures of love, come with no strings attached. They delight without demanding, they give without expecting, they free rather than burden. If a surprise leaves you anxious, guilty, or indebted, it isn't love, it's manipulation disguised as romance. The hardest step is reclaiming your right to receive without repayment. To understand that love is not a competition of who can outgive whom. That the truest expressions of care are often quiet, steady, and unmeasured. Once you step outside the loop, you see the truth. The person who constantly surprises you wasn't proving their love. They were setting the rules of your prison. Because love isn't about keeping score. It isn't about who can outdo the other in effort, extravagance, or sacrifice. Real love doesn't make you anxious to measure up. It makes you safe to simply exist. And once you recognize that, you'll never confuse manipulation for romance again. Time investment trap, they don't chain you with locks. They don't hold you with ropes. Instead, they bind you with time. Every year you've spent together becomes another link in the chain. Every memory becomes evidence. Every sacrifice becomes proof. Every moment of your life poured into them becomes a weapon that they can use against you. And when you begin to imagine leaving, their voice is there. After everything we've been through, after all these years, you're really going to throw it all away. This is the time investment trap, where the length of your history is used to imprison your future. The psychology behind it is brutally effective. Humans have what behavioral scientists call the sunk cost fallacy. Once we've invested time, money, or energy into something, we struggle to let it go, even if it's destroying us. We stay at the bad job because we've already given it 10 years. We finish the awful movie because we're already an hour in. And in relationships, this fallacy becomes emotional quicksand. You don't want to believe the years you've given were wasted. You don't want to face the unbearable truth that your loyalty, your love, your patience might have been poured into someone who never deserved it. And so you stay, hoping the next year will justify the last 10. Take the story of a woman who endured a decade of emotional neglect. Every time she threatened to leave, her partner reminded her, "We've built too much together. Think of all the memories, all the years. You can't just walk away now." And so she stayed, each year layering over the last, each sacrifice digging the hole deeper. By the time she realized her life was slipping by, 2 decades were gone. She wasn't staying out of love. She was staying out of fear that leaving would mean admitting the years were lost. Or imagine a man who gave his 20s and 30s to a partner who criticized, belittled, and controlled him. Whenever he thought of leaving, she reminded him of the vacations, the photos, the nights they spent together. "You can't just erase all of that," she would say. And he believed her. He convinced himself that leaving would mean those memories no longer mattered. What he didn't see was that staying meant sacrificing every memory he hadn't yet made. Memories that could have belonged to a freer, truer life. The cruelty of the time investment trap is that it twists something beautiful, shared history, into a weapon. Memories that should bring warmth become shackles. Sacrifices that should be honored become leverage. It convinces you that leaving isn't just about losing the person. It's about losing yourself, because so much of who you are has been woven into the years you spent together. But here's the truth. No amount of time invested can turn a bad relationship into a good one. The past is already spent. Staying will not give it back. In fact, every year you remain only deepens the loss. The real waste is not leaving. It is continuing to trade your future for the illusion that your past can still be redeemed. Biologically, this trap thrives because our brains fear loss more than they value gain. Psychologists call it loss aversion. The thought of losing 10 years hurts more than the thought of gaining the next 10 in freedom. And so people cling to the cage they know, rather than face the uncertainty of starting over. Yet the irony is cruel. The longer you stay, the heavier the trap becomes, until you are weighed down by decades you can never reclaim. Escaping the time investment trap means shifting the question. Instead of asking, "How much time have I already lost?" you ask, "How much time do I still have left?" The past is carved in stone. The future is still clay in your hands. Walking away does not erase your history. It honors it by refusing to waste even more. So when someone says, "After all these years, how can you leave?" the real answer is this: because of all these years, I can't afford to stay. And that is the brutal truth the trap never wants you to see. That your life is not measured by what you've already given away, but by what you still have the power to claim.